Lost media is pretty sick. It's cool to think about stuff that was made but never got shown to the public for whatever reason. We like to think most reasons are creepy, but even if they aren't, it's still interesting. I wanted to make a video on lost media, and I thought that with my channel's context, it would be best for me to do one focused on horror movies, since that's kind of one of my shticks around here. So yeah, sit back, relax, and let's get into this. Follow my Instagram, join my Discord, let's hang out, comment what your favorite horror movie is too. I love responding to you guys. Also subscribe, love you guys. Okay, mwah. In layer 1, we're starting with London After Midnight. From 1927. London After Midnight is one of the most sought-after lost films in history. Directed by Todd Browning and starring Lon Chaney, the movie was a silent horror movie that has since gained near mythical status. Chaney, known as the Man of a Thousand Faces for his incredible ability to transform himself through makeup, played a detective disguised as a horrifying sharp-toothed vampire. The film's plot revolved around a mysterious death and a subsequent investigation in a creepy mansion filled with ghoulish characters. The last known copy of the film was destroyed in a 1967 fire at MGM's vault, and despite efforts, no complete print has ever been recovered. The tantalizing part about London After Midnight is the speculation about how terrifying Chaney's performance was, combined with the eerie makeup and the atmosphere Browning, later famous for Dracula, was able to create. All that remains now are a few still photographs, posters, and a reconstructed version of the movie using these stills. Fans still hope that a copy will one day surface, but as of now, it remains one of the most famous examples of lost cinema. Next up we got Event Horizon Deleted Scenes. While Event Horizon itself is not lost, the deleted scenes and original extended cut of this sci-fi horror film have become the stuff of legend. Directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, the film involves a spaceship that disappears into a black hole and returns with something horrifyingly evil. The final cut, which was released to theaters, is already infamous for its disturbing imagery, but the original cut was far more graphic and unsettling. Early screenings were reportedly so intense that audiences reacted viscerally, causing the studio to demand heavy edits. These edits removed much of the gore and nightmarish sequences, particularly those involving the hellish dimension the ship supposedly traveled to. Some of the footage included longer scenes of violence, such as the infamous blood orgy scene and the hallucination flashbacks. Unfortunately, much of this footage was either lost or damaged during the editing process. Anderson has mentioned in interviews that attempts to recover the original film have been unsuccessful, though a few deleted scenes have resurfaced on DVDs. For fans of the film, the mystery of what the full, uncut version of Event Horizon might have been remains a haunting curiosity. Next up we got Las Noches del Hombre Lobo. This is another famous example of lost media with a twist that many film historians now doubt that it ever existed at all. This film was reportedly the second in a series of Paul Naschke's Waldemar Daninsky werewolf movies. Naschke was Spain's most famous horror actor, and his Daninsky character became an iconic European take on the werewolf myth. According to Naschke himself, Las Noches del Hombre Lobo was shot in Paris and featured his character Daninsky battling against a curse that turns him into a werewolf. However, no evidence of the film has ever surfaced. Not a single still, poster, or production record has ever been found. Naschke later speculated that the director might have been dissatisfied with the final product and destroyed it, or that it was never released for some other unknown reason. Some film scholars believe that the movie might have been a fabrication, possibly due to miscommunication or confusion over Naschke's prolific output of films. Whether it ever existed or not, Las Noches del Hombre Lobo remains a tantalizing mystery for horror fans. The Butcher. The Butcher remains a mystery wrapped in horror legend. Released in 2001, it reportedly adopted a faux documentary style, immersing viewers in a brutal exploration of a serial killer's life and deeds. The film was allegedly shot to feel hyper-realistic, with a handheld found footage aesthetic that blurred the line between the reality and the fiction. Screenings were said to be extremely limited, likely due to the film's disturbing content, including graphic violence that was mistaken by some for actual snuff footage. Adding to its mystique is the fact that even basic details about the Butcher are obscure. There's no known director, no official distribution, and no verified copies. Yeah, for horror enthusiasts it has become an underground obsession, with rumors circulating in horror forums and chat rooms about its whereabouts, if it exists at all. Next up we got Dracula, the 1931 version. Universal's Spanish-speaking Dracula, filmed concurrently with the English version starring Bela Lugosi, is a unique piece of cinema history. Shot on the same sets but with a Spanish-speaking cast and crew, this version took advantage of the groundwork laid by the English-language team, enhancing the film with richer shadows and a more fluid, dramatic atmosphere. While Lugosi's Dracula is iconic, Carlos Vilaia's portrayal as the Count in Dracula brings an entirely different, more expressive intensity. Many film scholars and fans argue that this version is technically superior due to more dynamic cinematography and ambitious camera work. For years, it was largely unknown outside Spanish-speaking regions, only to be rediscovered and appreciated for the visual and tonal depth it brings to Stoker's gothic tale. Next up we got Nosferatu. This silent German horror, directed by F.W. Murnau, remains one of the most atmospheric and unsettling interpretations of the vampire myth. Nosferatu was a thinly veiled adaptation of Dracula that led to legal troubles with Bram Stoker's widow, who ordered all prints of the film to be destroyed. Miraculously, some copies survived, preserving the haunting vision of Count Orlok, played by Max Schreck. Orlok's inhuman features, his elongated fingers, skeletal face, and gaunt frame, brought an eerie, otherworldly presence that set Nosferatu apart from other vampire films. The minimalist settings and stark lighting add to the film's uncanny quality, capturing the bleakness of plague-ridden Europe. It's a testament to the power of early horror and visual storytelling, surviving both literal and legal erasure to become a cult phenomenon. Next up we got Cannibal Holocaust Deleted Piranha Scene. Cannibal Holocaust, notorious for its extreme violence and realistic portrayal of indigenous Amazonian tribes, originally included an additional scene known as the Piranha Scene. In this lost scene, a character was supposedly lowered into a river as piranhas swarmed and attacked, similar in brutality to the film's other shocking sequences. This scene was cut during post-production, reportedly due to technical issues, though some speculate it was removed to avoid further controversy. This lost footage has become something of a legend, with fans speculating on how it might have intensified the already controversial film. While Cannibal Holocaust is infamous for its disturbing content, this piranha scene, I don't know, I kind of want to see it. Next up we got Cleopatra from 1899. Cleopatra, directed by George Méliès, is one of the earliest films to tackle horror themes through the lens of history and myth. The film, also known as The Death of Cleopatra, showcased Méliès's innovative use of visual effects, depicting Cleopatra's resurrection as a ghastly and supernatural event. Only fragments of this silent short have survived, but is thought to have combined elements of horror, fantasy, and historical drama, which was a pretty unique blend for its time. Cleopatra's ghostly reanimation was brought to life through early stop-motion techniques, which fascinated audiences and set a precedent for cinematic illusions. Méliès's work with Cleopatra laid a foundation for future horror and fantasy films, so it's pretty cool. Next up we got Freaks Deleted Scenes. Todd Browning's Freaks is famous and infamous for casting real sideshow performers in a story about circus life, challenging societal norms around beauty, disability, and revenge. But originally, Freaks was even more shocking, with additional scenes that delved deeper into the characters' lives and relationships, as well as a longer, gorier climax where the, quote, freaks exact revenge on the manipulative trapeze artist and strongman. After disastrous test screenings, MGM executives demanded heavy cuts, resulting in the removal of about 30 minutes. Those lost scenes reportedly included more disturbing visuals and backstory for the sideshow characters, which would have deepened the audience's empathy for them. To this day, those missing 30 minutes remain one of horror's great mysteries. It's pretty cool. Next up we got Dracula 1920. This early, silent Russian adaptation of Dracula, directed by and starring unknowns, was one of the first cinematic interpretations of Stoker's tale, predating the famous 1931 Universal Dracula by over a decade. Unfortunately, this version of Dracula was not preserved and no copies are known to exist. Little is known about how closely it followed Stoker's novel, but it's likely that this silent version leaned heavily into expressionist, theatrical elements that were popular in Russian and German cinema at the time. Its loss is pretty significant, as it represents an early attempt to bring Western horror literature to screen, offering a lost perspective on how different cultures began adapting horror into cinema. Next up we got Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This 1908 adaptation of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, produced by the Selig Polyscope Company, is one of the earliest horror films on record. Starring an actor whose identity has been lost to time, this silent film reportedly focused on the physical transformation of Jekyll into Hyde, a feat that would have been visually arresting given the technical limitations of the time. No copies of the film exist today, making it a pretty prime example of lost silent horror. What we do know about it comes from early reviews and advertisements, which suggest that it leaned into Hyde's monstrous appearance. This adaptation helps set a standard for horror on film, using visual effects and makeup to create unsettling transformations that would later become a staple of the genre. Frankenstein Deleted censored scenes. James Whale's Frankenstein from 1931 remains iconic, but the film's original cut was even darker. One of the most famous scenes removed involved the monster accidentally drowning a young girl named Maria. Early audiences found the scene too shocking, and it was cut after initial screenings, leaving viewers with only the tragic aftermath. Other deleted scenes reportedly showed more of Dr. Frankenstein's unethical experiments and hinted at the monster's suffering, amplifying the horror and tragedy of his existence, which sounds pretty cool. Some of these cuts were eventually restored in later releases, but the full extent of the censored material has yet to be recovered. The removed footage paints a picture of a film that was intended to be more horrific, revealing a Frankenstein that was initially even more unflinching. Groupie. Groupie is a film that has practically vanished from existence. Made in the mid-90s, it supposedly followed a rock band targeted by a deranged fan who would go to disturbing lengths to get close to them. Rumors suggest that the film's violent and possibly exploitative content, combined with behind-the-scenes issues, led to it being buried. No known copies have surfaced, and those who claim to have seen it often describe it as disturbing and uncomfortable, leaning heavily into themes of obsession and horror. For those intrigued by rare, lost horror films, Groupie remains a pretty peculiar mystery, one that horror fans speculate about but can't confirm or deny. Next up we got Il Mostro di Frankenstein. One of Italy's earliest entries into horror cinema, Il Mostro di Frankenstein is an important yet lost adaptation of Shelley's Frankenstein. This silent film predated Universal's version and depicted the monster in a much more humanized form. The film allegedly highlighted the ethical horrors of Dr. Frankenstein's experiment, portraying the monster as a tragic figure rather than a mere beast. Despite its cultural significance, no known copies survive today, making it one of the many casualties of early European cinema. Its absence leaves a pretty significant gap in the history of Frankenstein adaptations, as it represented a distinctly Italian perspective on the horror classic. Next we got The Monkey's Paw. Based on W. Jacobs' famous horror story, the 1933 Monkey's Paw adaptation remains incomplete in its original English form. While international copies of the film exist, the English audio track has never been recovered. This film follows the story of a cursed object that grants wishes with dire consequences, delivering a horror experience that feels chillingly inevitable. The missing English audio means that English-speaking audiences lack the immersive experience of hearing the original actors' performances, and subtitled versions lack some of the nuance that native audio might convey. Its partial loss is a reminder of how fragile early sound films were, with languages and dialogue tracks sometimes being treated as secondary to visual preservation, which is kind of crazy in today's landscape. Next up we got Les Mémoires du Diable. This movie, known as The House of the Devil, is often considered the first horror film ever made. It's from 1896. This short, silent film follows a playful demon who torments a knight in a haunted castle, showcasing Georges Méliès's pioneering use of special effects, which we already talked about him a little bit earlier on this iceberg. He did the Cleopatra movie we talked about earlier as well. But anyways, with ghost skeletons and an appearance by the devil himself, it created a theatrical atmosphere that would later inspire horror. Although prints have been found, they vary in length and quality, leaving some ambiguity about the film's original cut. Méliès's creative use of editing, props, and in-camera effects to bring supernatural elements to life make it a pretty foundational piece of horror history, one that's inspired countless filmmakers in the years since. Next we got The Cat Creeps. This early horror film from 1930 was Universal's attempt to remake the silent horror classic The Cat and the Canary with sound, creating an atmospheric story of eerie mansions and family curses. Known for its sound design and suspenseful visuals, The Cat Creeps was one of the first horror talkies, but was lost due to poor preservation practices. Only a few stills and brief descriptions remain, suggesting it was heavily influenced by German Expressionism. Its disappearance is especially unfortunate because it marked a turning point in how sound was used to enhance horror. This film represents an early experiment in blending sound to create more tension and chills in horror movies, which is pretty sick. Next up we got Das Phantom der Oper. Long before the famous Lon Chaney adaptation, Germany produced Das Phantom der Oper, a early, silent adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera. Unfortunately, this version is entirely lost, with only scattered information about its plot and production available. Directed by Ernst Matre, it likely drew from German Expressionism, which was popular at the time, to create a dark, stylized version of the opera's underground lair. Given the success of later adaptations, film historians have often speculated how this early interpretation approached the story's mix of horror, romance, and tragedy. Its absence leaves a pretty tantalizing gap, though. It's pretty sad. Next up we got Dracula Halala. This, also known as Draculas Death, that's what it translates to, is a Hungarian silent film believed to be one of the earliest Dracula adaptations, though it bore little resemblance to Bram Stoker's novel. The story reportedly revolved around a young woman who meets Count Dracula in an asylum. Its surreal narrative and dreamlike visuals reportedly conveyed a nightmarish quality that was distinct from other vampire tales at the time. No copies are known to exist, and only a few promotional materials have survived, leaving much about this unique adaptation shrouded in mystery. Its loss is entirely tragic, as it would have provided insight into how non-Western European cinema engaged with Dracula before Hollywood's version cemented his image. Next up we got The Shining deleted scenes and epilogue. Stanley Kubrick's The Shining originally included an epilogue where Wendy and Danny are shown in the hospital, hinting at their psychological trauma after their ordeal at the Overlook Hotel. Kubrick later cut this scene though, believing it undercut the film's ambiguous, unsettling tone. In addition to this epilogue, various other scenes were reportedly filmed, including more elaborate visions and supernatural elements tied to the hotel. Kubrick personally ordered all unused footage destroyed, making the search for these deleted scenes essentially impossible. Fans and scholars alike have long speculated about what these scenes might have added, but they still remain a pretty enduring mystery. Next up we got The Vampire, from 1913. The Vampire was an early American silent horror film directed by Robert G. Vignola, loosely inspired by Rudyard Kipling's poem The Vampire. The film focused on a seductive woman who preys on unsuspecting men, embodying the femme fatale archetype that would later become central in horror and noir. It used dance and symbolism to convey a vampiric allure, although there were no actual vampires in the modern sense. Sadly, the film is now lost, with no surviving prints known to exist. Its influence, however, can be seen in the evolution of the vamp character in later films, marking the vampire as an important, if missing, piece of horror film history. Alright, and that was Layer 1, all the pretty well-known ones. I kind of sped through those guys, so let's get into Layer 2, some of the little bit deeper ones. Next up we got It, Baby Scene. This refers to a deleted scene from It, the first chapter of Andy Muschietti's adaptation of Stephen King's novel. The film is notorious for its terrifying depiction of Pennywise the Clown, but some scenes were deemed too disturbing even for the final cut. One such scene reportedly involved Pennywise attacking and possibly consuming a baby. While Muschietti has hinted at the existence of such a scene, it was ultimately cut to avoid pushing the boundaries of taste too far. The scene was never included in any extended cuts or home releases, making it one of the more elusive deleted sequences from the film. Though only referenced in interviews, the baby scene continues to intrigue fans who are curious about just how far the movie originally intended to go in portraying Pennywise's evil nature. Next up we got Chara Vulga. This is a piece of Polish urban legend tied to mysterious abductions during the Cold War. The legend revolves around a Black Volga limousine that was said to be used by Soviet officials or other sinister figures to kidnap children. Though not an actual film, there were reports that a movie adaptation of this urban legend was attempted in 1973. However, no evidence of such a film has surfaced, leading many to speculate that it was either never completed or that any existing footage was deliberately hidden or destroyed. The legend of the Chara Vulga was so pervasive that it transcended folklore, making the possibility of a film adaptation all the more compelling. Fans of the urban legend and conspiracy theories have long been on the lookout for any sign of the film, though its existence remains unconfirmed. Next up we got Dead End from 1985. Dead End is another one of those mystery films from the 1980s, rumored to have been a slasher or horror film, but with very little information available to confirm its existence. The film was reportedly about a group of teenagers who take a wrong turn and find themselves hunted by a crazed killer. Unlike other lost films from the era, no surviving posters, trailers, or VHS copies have ever surfaced, leading some to believe that it was either never released or only shown at small festivals or private screenings. Like The Butcher and Groupie, Dead End has developed a reputation as an urban legend of sorts among horror fans, with only vague recollections and rumors keeping the idea of its existence alive. Next up we got Kurt's Bloody Self-End. Kurt's Bloody Self-End is an incredibly obscure film from 1984. According to rumors, the film was an experimental horror movie with disturbing themes of self-harm, and it allegedly featured very graphic depictions of self-ending. Very little is known about the movie itself, and there is speculation that it may have been banned or deliberately destroyed due to its content. The only mention of Kurt's bloody self-end comes from a few underground film circles, but no prints, stills, or official records have ever been found. Some believe the film was a low-budget independent project that never was officially distributed, while others think it may just be a completely fabricated, urban legend. Either way, it remains one of the more chilling examples of lost media, because it's, the topic is really bad and not good to talk about. Next up we got Life Without Soul. Life Without Soul is one of the earliest adaptations of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein and is considered a lost silent film. Directed by Joseph W. Smiley, the film took some liberties with Shelley's original story, renaming the monster, quote, the Brute, and focusing more on moral and philosophical questions. The film is significant because it represents one of the first attempts to adapt Frankenstein to the screen, long before the 1931 version with Boris Karloff. Unfortunately, like many early silent films, Life Without Soul has not survived and no known copies exist today. What we do know about the movie comes from reviews, advertisements, and a handful of production stills. The film's status as a lost work adds to its mystique, as it predated a lot of the iconic cinematic portrayals of Frankenstein's monster that would define pop culture. Dracula Epilogue. The original release of Dracula from 1931, directed by Todd Browning, reportedly included an epilogue scene that was later removed. In this epilogue, Edward Van Sloan, who played Van Helsing, would address the audience directly, warning them that vampires do in fact exist, and urging them to believe in the dangers of such creatures. This scene, much like the man comes to life trope used in Frankenstein, was intended to create a sense of realism and engage the audience in the horror. However, the scene was quickly cut from later prints of the film, and no copies of this epilogue have survived. Fans of classic horror have long been intrigued by the idea of this missing segment, but its disappearance remains one of the lesser-known mysteries surrounding Dracula. The Werewolf, 1913. The Werewolf is a lost silent film that holds the distinction of being the first werewolf movie ever made. Directed by Henry McCrae, the film is based on a short story by Henry Bogrand and involves a Native American woman who transforms into a wolf to exact revenge on her enemy. The film was one of many early silent films to be destroyed in the infamous 1924 Universal Vault Fire, which wiped out countless early cinematic works. No prints or stills of the werewolf survive, and its legacy has largely been overshadowed by later werewolf films. However, for fans of early horror cinema, the film's loss represents a significant gap in the history of werewolf depictions in popular culture. Oh fuck, this one's gonna be a nightmare to pronounce, guys. I'm gonna do my best. I'm pretty fucking white though. Okay, let's see here. Shoujo Tsubaki Chika Gintao Gekika de Sahiro Maro. This 1992 animated adaptation is a deeply disturbing work that is often considered lost due to its extreme content and limited distribution. The film is based on Maro's grotesque and surreal manga, which tells the story of a young girl sold into a freak show where she endures horrific abuse. The animation was controversial for its graphic depictions of violence, SA, and body horror, which led to its withdrawal from mainstream circulation. While it was technically released, very few legitimate copies exist, and it has never seen widespread distribution. For years, it was considered lost or impossible to find outside of underground circles, though a few digital rips have surfaced on the internet. The film's notorious reputation continues to grow among fans of extreme and avant-garde animation. Friday the 13th Part 3 Alternate Endings. Friday the 13th Part 3 had several alternate endings that were either scrapped before filming or cut during editing. One of the most well-known deleted endings involves a scene where Jason decapitates the final girl, Chris, after emerging from the lake. In another ending, Chris would escape the confrontation with Jason, but find herself in a mental institution, much like the ending of Halloween 2. These endings were either removed for pacing reasons or because they were considered too dark for audiences at the time. While some storyboards and production notes about these alternate endings still exist, the footage itself has never surfaced, making it a pretty highly sought-after piece of Friday the 13th lore. All-American Massacre. All-American Massacre was intended to be a spin-off and sequel to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, directed by William Hooper, the son of the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre director Tobe Hooper. The film was said to focus on Chop Top, one of the more colorful members of the cannibal family, and it was meant to further explore the backstory of the Sawyers. Unfortunately, despite being completed, the film was never officially released due to a lack of funding and issues with distribution. Over the years, short clips and trailers have surfaced online, but the full film remains locked away. Horror films have clamored for its release, particularly because it was a direct sequel to a beloved installment in the Texas Chainsaw franchise, but it never got released. Crybaby Lane. Crybaby Lane is a Nickelodeon horror movie that aired once in 2000 and then disappeared for years, leading to rumors that it had been banned for being too disturbing for children. The movie tells the story of two brothers who accidentally release the spirit of a dead twin, resulting in supernatural chaos. For years, fans believed the movie had been deliberately shelved by Nickelodeon due to parental complaints. However, in 2011, the film resurfaced when Nickelodeon aired it again as part of a special Halloween event. While technically not lost anymore, Crybaby Lane was considered lost media for over a decade, and its brief disappearance turned into something of an urban legend for a generation of kids who saw it during its initial airing and then wondered what happened to it. Gremlins R-rated screenplay. Gremlins, directed by Joe Dante, was originally envisioned as a much darker R-rated horror film before it was toned down for its eventual PG rating. The original screenplay by Chris Columbus featured more explicit violence, including a scene where the Gremlins decapitate Billy's mom and throw her head down the stairs, as well as additional gruesome attacks on the townspeople. While the film retains its dark humor and horror elements, these more graphic scenes were cut in favor of a more family-friendly tone, which ultimately contributed to the creation of the PG-13 rating. The R-rated script has never officially been released, though some fans have managed to track down early drafts that hint at the more intense horror that Gremlins could have had. House of a Thousand Corpses deleted scenes. Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses was originally intended to be much more graphic, with a harder R rating. However, much of the most disturbing material was removed after the studio feared an NC-17 rating. Some of the deleted scenes included longer and more brutal deaths, extended torture sequences, and additional character backstory for the murderous Firefly family. There were also scenes involving more grotesque practical effects that were ultimately deemed too extreme. While a few deleted scenes made their way into DVD extras, many have never been fully restored. These missing sequences remained highly sought after by fans of the film, as they would offer a deeper glimpse into Rob Zombie's original vision for the film. Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. Bela Lugosi Dialogue. In Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, Bela Lugosi famously played the Frankenstein monster, but many of his scenes were cut, including significant dialogue. Originally, the monster was supposed to speak, but early test screenings reportedly resulted in laughter from the audience because of Lugosi's thick Hungarian accent. This reaction led to the removal of the monster's dialogue and many of his more expressive scenes. These cuts left Lugosi's performance feeling incomplete, as much of the intended character development was lost. Unfortunately, the deleted dialogue has never been found, and the film remains a curious artifact of what could have been a much more layered portrayal of the monster. Next up, we got Stygian. Stygian is a low-budget Australian film directed by James Wan and Shannon Young, predating Wan's later fame with Saw. The film, a psychological horror with surreal elements, was released in a very limited capacity, and today it's nearly impossible to find. There are no known copies circulating online, and the few people who claim to have seen it describe it as a bizarre and experimental work, far different from Wan's later mainstream success. While the film may not have had the impact of Saw, Stygian is still of interest to a lot of horror fans because it marks the very early creative beginnings of one of the most prominent directors of its genre. Its current lost status adds to the mystery surrounding Wan's early career, which is already pretty mysterious. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 deleted scenes. Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is known for its blend of horror and dark comedy, but the original cut was reportedly a lot gorier and more disturbing. Several scenes were either cut for pacing or to avoid an X rating, including extended shots of violence, more graphic depictions of Leatherface's victims, and additional backstory for the cannibalistic Sawyer family. One of the most infamous deleted scenes involves a sequence where Leatherface and his family consume a meal made from their victims. While some of these scenes have been partially restored in special editions, others remain lost, much to the frustration of fans who want to see the film in its most unfiltered form. The Ring serial killer scenes. The Ring from 2002, the American adaptation of the Japanese horror film Ringu, was rumored to have contained a subplot involving a serial killer. Early drafts of the screenplay reportedly featured more violent and disturbing scenes unrelated to the main plot of the cursed videotape. These scenes were ultimately removed to streamline the narrative and maintain focus on the supernatural horror elements, though. While the serial killer subplot has been mentioned by those involved in the film's production, no deleted footage of these scenes has ever surfaced, and their existence remains speculative. The removal of this material likely contributed to the film's more suspense-driven atmosphere, avoiding the mix of supernatural and real-world horror. The removal of this material likely contributed to the film's more suspense-driven atmosphere, avoiding the mix of supernatural and real-world horror. Book of Shadows, Blair Witch 2 Director's Cut. Book of Shadows Blair Witch 2 was a rushed follow-up to the groundbreaking Blair Witch project, and its director, Joe Berlinger, has been vocal about how the final cut of the film did not represent his vision. Berlinger's original vision was more of a psychological thriller, focusing on the media's influence on reality and perception. However, the studio demanded changes to make the film more marketable as a straightforward horror film, leading to the addition of gore and supernatural elements. Berlinger's director's cut, which emphasized ambiguity and mental deterioration, has never been released, and much of the original footage was either cut or altered beyond recognition. Fans of the Blair Witch franchise have long campaigned for the release of this alternate version, but for as of now, it remains elusive still, sadly. Eyes Wide Shut, deleted 24 minutes. Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut is famous for its enigmatic storytelling and psychological depth, but is also known for its missing 24 minutes of footage. Kubrick reportedly cut the material himself shortly before his death, although some argue that the studio may have pressured him into removing certain scenes due to their graphic sexual content. The most talked about deleted material involves extended sequences from the infamous masked orgy scene, which was already controversial for its explicitness. Kubrick's exact reasons for cutting the footage are unknown, but fans of the film believe that the lost minutes could offer crucial insights into the film's deeper themes that we never got to see. Unfortunately, these scenes have never surfaced and are presumed to be locked away in the studio's archives. King Kong's Spider Pit Scene. One of the most infamous lost scenes in film history, the spider pit sequence from the original King Kong, was reportedly so terrifying that it was cut after early test screenings. The scene involves several characters falling into a pit and being attacked by giant spiders and other monstrous creatures. Director Marion C. Cooper later said that the sequence was removed because it slowed down the pacing of the film, though others have suggested that the scene was deemed too gruesome for audiences at the time. Despite numerous searches, no footage of the scene has ever been found, and it's believed the original film elements were destroyed. However, reconstructions of the scene have been attempted based on storyboards and production notes, keeping the legend of the spider pit alive. Photographing a Ghost, 1898. Photographing a Ghost is a British short film directed by George Albert Smith, one of the pioneers of early cinema. It's notable for being one of the first films to depict supernatural elements, as it involved a group of people attempting to photograph a ghost, only for the ghost to appear and vanish before their eyes. The film was groundbreaking for its use of special effects, particularly double exposure, to create the illusion of the ghost. While some elements of photographing a ghost have survived, the complete film is lost, with only descriptions and fragments of footage remaining. This makes it one of the earliest examples of lost horror cinema. And another early one, we got Shennan Noos. Shennan Noos, also known as Resurrection of a Corpse, is a lost Japanese silent film from 1898. Very little is known about the plot, but it was reportedly one of the first Japanese films to explore supernatural themes. The film likely drew on traditional Japanese folklore and ghost stories, which would later become a major influence in Japanese cinema. Unfortunately, no copies of the film have survived, and it remains an early casualty of the fragile nature of early film stock. The loss of Shennan Noos represents a pretty significant gap in the history of Japanese horror cinema, as it predates many of the more well-known early Japanese films. Bak Jizo from 1989. Bak Jizo is a rare Japanese horror short from 1989 that has gained cult status despite being almost impossible to find. The film was reportedly inspired by traditional Japanese folklore surrounding the Jizo statues, which are said to protect the souls of children. Bak Jizo was a dark and eerie short that explored themes of death and the afterlife, but it was never widely released and has since disappeared from circulation. Fans of obscure Japanese horror have long sought out a copy of the film, but as of now, it remains pretty elusive. Den Gra Dam, or The Grey Lady. Den Gra Dam, The Grey Lady, is a Danish silent film from 1909. The film is based on a Danish ghost legend about a spectral woman who haunts a castle. Very little is known about the film beyond its basic premise, and no known copies have survived. Den Gra Dam is considered one of the earliest Danish horror films, and the loss of this film is particularly significant because it marks an early exploration of ghost stories on film. But yeah, there's really not much known about this one at all, so. The Dream Woman from 1914. This silent film, based on Wilkie Collins' short story of the same name, is a lost early British horror film. The Dream Woman tells the story of a man haunted by visions of a woman who later tries to kill him in real life. The film was praised for its eerie atmosphere and psychological depth, making it an early example of the use of dreams and the subconscious in cinema. No copies of the film are known to exist, so yeah, that kinda sucks. Friday the 13th Part 2 deleted scenes. Friday the 13th Part 2 originally contained scenes that were either cut for pacing or due to censorship concerns. The most infamous of these is an extended version of the opening scene where Alice, the final girl from the first scene, is killed by Jason. In the original version, her death was much more graphic. Other deleted scenes included longer and more violent death sequences, particularly involving Jeff and Sandra, who are impaled while having a fun time. These scenes were cut to avoid an X rating, and while some footage has been found and restored in special editions, much of it remains lost. The missing footage continues to fuel fan speculation about how much gorier Part 2 could have been. The Phantom of the Opera, TV scenes. Hammer Films' 1962 adaptation of The Phantom of the Opera, directed by Terence Fisher, had several scenes that were shot for television syndication. These additional scenes were reportedly added to pad the runtime for TV broadcast and were not a part of the original theatrical release. While these films were not crucial to the plot, they provided more exposition and extended dialogue. Some reports suggest that these scenes were cut back for pacing reasons in later television showings, and they have not been included in most home media releases. The original TV version, with all its added material, has become something of a collector's item, but it's difficult to find in its entirety today. The Phantom of the Opera sound version. The 1925 Phantom of the Opera, starring Lon Chaney, was originally a silent film, but it was later re-released with synchronized sound in 1929, featuring new dialogue and sound effects. This version also included a newly composed musical score. Unfortunately, much of the sound version is now lost. While some segments have survived, including a few sound sequences, the complete sound version has not been recovered in its entirety. The original sound elements were likely destroyed or deteriorated, as was common with early sound films, leaving only fragments and incomplete versions for modern audiences to appreciate. The Phantom of the Opera redemption ending. Another famous lost aspect of the 1925 Phantom of the Opera is its alternate redemption ending. The original ending, in which the Phantom dies a violent death at the hands of a mob, was reportedly replaced in some cuts by a different ending in which the Phantom achieves some form of redemption before dying. This alternate ending was shown in early test screenings but was eventually discarded in favor of the more dramatic and tragic mob scene. No complete footage of this redemption ending has been found, though descriptions and rumors persist about its content. The existence of such an ending remains one of the great mysteries surrounding this classic, and there's a lot of them. There's a lot of mysteries around this movie. The Fearless Vampire Killers US Cut. Roman Polanski's The Fearless Vampire Killers was heavily altered for its US version. The original European version of the film was longer and had a more subtle balance of horror and comedy, but the US cut, supervised by MGM, trimmed about 16 minutes and added a campy animated opening sequence. MGM also altered the title to The Fearless Vampire Killers, or Pardon Me But Your Teeth Are in My Neck, to play up the film's comedic aspects. These changes significantly altered the tone of the film, and the US cut was poorly received compared to the original European version. Although the European cut has since been made available, the US cut remains lost. The Collected. The Collected was the third installment in the Collector horror franchise, following The Collector from 2009 and The Collection from 2012. Production on The Collected began in 2019, but the film was halted halfway through, leaving it incomplete. Very little information about what was shot has been released, and the film's status has remained uncertain ever since. Rumors about behind-the-scenes issues, including budget problems and creative disagreements, have contributed to the film's indefinite limbo. Despite fan demand for a resolution to the Collector trilogy, there has been no official release date, and much of the footage that was shot remains unseen. As of now, it's still lost. Child's Play Uncut 2-hour version. The original cut of Child's Play reportedly ran for nearly 2 hours, significantly longer than the theatrical release. Early drafts of the film included more scenes developing the relationship between Andy and his mother, as well as additional scenes of Chucky's violent rampage. These extra sequences were likely removed to streamline the pacing and avoid an X rating, which would have limited the film's box office potential. Some of the deleted scenes were released in various DVD editions, but the full, uncut 2-hour version of the film has never been made available. Fans of the Child's Play series have long been curious to see this extended version, which would provide a deeper look into Chucky's malevolent nature and the terror that he brings to the Barclay family. La Caverne Maudite. La Caverne Maudite, or The Cursed Cave, is one of the early works of Georges Méliès, the pioneer of special effects in cinema, who we've talked about a bunch before. The film depicted a cave haunted by supernatural forces, with Méliès's signature use of trick photography and elaborate sets. While the film itself is not completely lost, much of it is missing, and what remains is incomplete. Like many of Méliès's films, La Caverne Maudite was not well preserved, and the surviving footage has suffered significant damage. However, the film's insignificance as one of the earliest examples of supernatural horror in cinema history has kept it in the spotlight for historians and film enthusiasts. The Mummy deleted scenes. Karl Freund's The Mummy from 1932, starring Boris Karloff, originally included several scenes that were either cut for pacing or to meet the censorship standards of the time. One of the most famous deleted scenes involved a more graphic depiction of the mummy's resurrection and the pursuit of the heroine. Early scripts and production notes also suggest that the film originally had more violent sequences, including scenes of torture and human sacrifice, which were ultimately toned down or removed. The missing footage has never been recovered, but the surviving film remains a classic of Universal's horror canon. But it'd be interesting to see what deleted scenes there were and how it added to the original film. A Nightmare on Elm Street prequel production material. There have long been rumors of a Nightmare on Elm Street prequel that would explore Freddy Krueger's life before his death and transformation into the dream-stalking killer. Early production material and concepts were developed for such a prequel, but the project never came to fruition. Some elements of Freddy's backstory, including his trial and death at the hand of a vigilante mob, were hinted at in the original series, but a full-fledged prequel film was never made. Some production sketches and outlines have surfaced over the years, but the prequel remains one of the great what-ifs in horror cinema. Fans are still curious about what a deeper exploration of Freddy's human life might have looked like. The Terror from 1928. The Terror was one of the first all-talking horror films, directed by Roy Del Ruth and produced by Warner Bros. The film, based on Edgar Wallace's play, followed a group of people trapped in a mansion as they are stalked by a mysterious killer. While the film was innovative for its use of sound technology, very little of it has survived. The audio recordings have been lost and only a few fragments of the film itself remain. The Terror is a significant piece of early horror history as it helped pave the way for later sound horror films, but its nearly complete disappearance has left it largely forgotten. sadly. Film historians continue to search for any surviving elements, but so far remains still lost. The Wizard from 1927. The Wizard was an early American horror film directed by Richard Rosen, involving a scientist who develops a serum that can bring people back from the dead. The film was reportedly similar in theme to Frankenstein, though it was more focused on the ethical dilemmas of reviving the dead. While the film was released in 1927, no known prints of The Wizard have survived, and very little information about the film is available today. Some posters and promotional materials exist, but the film itself is considered lost. Its disappearance has led to speculation about its influence on later horror films and the impact it might have had if it were still available for modern audiences. Now that was Lair 2, guys. Hope you're having fun. Lair 3 gets even more crazy and dark and lost, and there are a few in Lair 3 that I'm actually really excited for, so let's get straight into Lair 3. Alright, that's the end of Lair 2, and let's get into Lair 3. This Man from 2011 was a planned horror thriller that capitalized on the viral internet phenomenon of This Man, a sketch of a mysterious man whom several people claim to have seen in their dreams. Now, that whole thing online proved to be just a scam, but anyways, the movie was still in production. The premise was ripe for adaptation, and the film was expected to explore the psychological terror of this faceless figure. However, despite early announcements and a lot of online buzz, the movie never materialized. It's unclear whether the film was ever fully shot or if it got stuck in development hell, but no footage or promotional material has ever been released. And then given the urban legend status of This Man, the film's disappearance has only deepened the mystery. Broken is a highly controversial short film from 1993 directed by Richard Stanley, best known for his work on Hardware from 1990. It was reportedly a violent and disturbing exploration of psychological trauma and was part of Stanley's experimental film work in the early 90s. However, due to its graphic content and its harsh treatment of sensitive themes, Broken was never widely distributed. It was shown at a few underground screenings, but it was quickly withdrawn from circulation, and Stanley himself later expressed regret about the film's content. Because of its limited release and the extreme nature of its themes, no known copies of Broken exist today, though it continues to be discussed in a lot of cult film circles. Black the Ripper. Imagine if Jack the Ripper's shadowy, bloody reign wasn't confined to the dark streets of Victorian London, but resurrected in modern-day London instead. That's the terrifying premise of Black the Ripper, where the infamous Ripper is brought back with a supernatural twist. Supposedly, the story follows a vengeful Jack wreaking havoc once again, making modern Londoners his targets in a series of graphic killings. The film reportedly went too far with its violence and explicit scenes, turning it into an urban legend among horror aficionados. Only scattered amounts exist from people claiming to have seen the movie at limited screenings before it vanished. The whole thing plays into the allure of that NSFW label that, in this case, might not just be about the gore, but a raw, shocking experience that's better left hidden. Fans continue to hope a full copy will someday surface, and the idea that it might be floating around in some private collection makes it all the more enticing. Cooking Class Cannibal. Think Master Chef meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre. A group of culinary students eager to learn from a world-renowned chef soon realize that they're the main course. The chef, rumored to be a cult-like figure in his profession, manipulates his students, challenging them to their limits until it becomes clear they're not just learning about food, but being prepped for the meal themselves. This indie film barely saw the light of day. The few who claim to have caught early screenings describe it as raw and disturbing, and it seemed primed to become a controversial cult classic. However, it was shelved after legal disputes over its graphic content, and the film, with its mysterious director, seemingly disappeared. Whether it was truly as intense as people say, or if it's just become hyped up by horror fans craving a forbidden film, remains unknown, but that kinda still only adds to its twisted charm. Der Janu Cop. In this rare take on Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, director F.W. Murnau, best known for Nosferatu, created a deeply psychological horror that focuses on the dark and light sides of human nature. The film starred Conrad Veidt, a horror icon in his own right, who gave a haunting performance as a man torn between two identities. Murnau was a master of German expressionism, using shadows and exaggerated sets to draw viewers into the twisted mindset of his characters. Sadly, all known copies of this movie were destroyed, and today only production stills and written accounts exist. describing scenes so visually gripping that they feel almost supernatural. The horror community mourns its loss, with some even calling it a holy grail of horror. Because of its eerie visuals and Murnau's legacy, it's thought that if Der Janu Cop ever surfaced, it would showcase a haunting, unique take on the struggle between good and evil. Der Golem from 1915 and Der Golem und die Tanzerine from 1917. Der Golem of 1915 was a silent horror film that adapted an ancient Jewish legend of a clay figure, the Golem, brought to life to protect a community. However, unlike later adaptations, the 1915 film portrays the Golem's creation as disastrous, unleashing a powerful and uncomfortable force. While the third movie, Der Golem How He Came into the World from 1920, is still watchable today, the original 1915 adaptation took a darker approach that vanished after its premiere. Its 1917 prequel, Der Golem und die Tanzerine, pushed the boundaries even further, blending horror and romance as the golem falls for a dancer, a twist that adds depth to the myth but was never widely seen. Both films are relics of early horror, merging folklore with expressionist visuals, and their absence adds to their mystique. Ringu Brussels Cut. Ringu is already a horror classic, with its story of a cursed videotape that dooms viewers to die after 7 days. But there's a version known as the Brussels Cut that supposedly contains scenes and edits different from the well-known version. The story revolves around a journalist investigating a cursed videotape which releases the terrifying spirit of Sadako, a restless ghost who takes revenge on anyone who watches it. The Brussels Cut was screened only once at a festival in Belgium and has become the stuff of legend, with fans speculating about what changes it might contain. Could there be more unsettling scenes, or a deeper dive into Sadako's tragic past? Those lucky enough to catch it at the festival describe a subtly different viewing experience, but the lack of any recorded copy has left fans in the dark, feeding into the mystique that surrounds this elusive horror version. Scream 5 and Scream 6. Wes Craven production material. The Scream series defined meta horror, and Wes Craven was at its heart. Although he wasn't around for Scream 5 and 6, it's rumored that Craven left behind notes, sketches, and perhaps even scripts exploring where he saw the series going. Many fans wonder if the Craven material held darker or more reflective twists, given his unmatched insight into the horror genre. While we may never know exactly what Craven had in mind, the prospect that he could have left an untold vision of the Scream world drives fans to speculate about what horror milestones we might be missing out on. The Cuckoo Clocks of Hell from 1973. Now here's a bizarre one. The Cuckoo Clocks of Hell is believed to be a surreal, psychological horror film directed by an obscure figure who apparently vanished after completing it. The title alone invokes something unsettling, as if it would dive headfirst into madness and existential terror. Stories surrounding this film claim it was inspired by Dante's Inferno, but with a strange, almost absurdist twist. The plot supposedly follows a character descending into a surreal underworld, encountering strange beings and terrifying sights, each more bizarre than the last. Despite persistent rumors that a cut of the film was screened for a select audience, no one has ever been able to confirm this screening nor locate any existing footage. It's said that the only known print might be hidden away in a private collection, leaving fans to wonder if the cinematic descent into hell might ever see the light of day. The Rocky Horror Picture Show. Songs from canceled sequels. Few musicals have had the impact of the Rocky Horror Picture Show with its catchy songs and over-the-top characters. But what many people don't know is that there were once plans for sequels, yes, plural, that Richard O'Brien, the film's creator, was involved in developing. These sequels would have expanded the stories of beloved characters like Frankenstein and the Transylvanian Crew, and reportedly had a few songs already written and recorded. However, the production faced numerous setbacks, including financial challenges and creative differences. Over time, the songs from the sequels faded into obscurity, with only rumors and partial lyrics remaining. Fans would give anything to hear these tracks, imagining what kind of strange, campy, and possibly even darker themes the sequels would have brought to life. The Thing 1982 deleted scenes. John Carpenter's The Thing is already a masterpiece of isolation and paranoia, with its claustrophobic setting and monstrous practical effects, but there are whispers about deleted scenes that might delve even further into the terror. Among them is a rumored extended version of the blood test scene, where tensions are said to reach even greater heights. Some accounts claim these deleted scenes show the aliens' shapeshifting abilities in even more gruesome and bizarre ways than the final cut allowed. Imagine Carpenter's vision going even darker, uncovering new horrors that make the viewer question every character's humanity. These scenes supposedly were deemed too intense or lengthy, and so they were cut to keep the pacing sharp. But fans speculate that they would add even more dread to an already chilling experience. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, Uncut version. The Halloween franchise is no stranger to behind-the-scenes drama, but Halloween 5 took it to another level. The original cut was said to contain scenes that explained more of Michael's disturbing origins and motivations, with a grittier tone that pushed the limits of what audiences might have expected. This uncut version supposedly explores deeper psychological horror, focusing on Michael's connection to his niece, Jamie, and giving viewers a darker, more tragic view of the Myers family curse. For years, fans have hoped that this version might turn up on a director's cut release, but so far it remains elusive. The idea of seeing Michael in an even more deranged light has kept fans hunting, clinging to the hope that somewhere the true version of Halloween 5 still exists. The Hills Have Eyes deleted scenes. Wes Craven's The Hills Have Eyes is already brutal, following a family fighting for survival against cannibalistic mutants in the desert. But there are persistent rumors of additional scenes that were so violent and graphic that they had to be removed to avoid an X rating. These lost scenes allegedly contained even more of the savage cannibal clan's backstory and delved into their twisted lifestyle, adding layers to the horror. Craven was known for pushing boundaries, and these scenes were likely another example of that, showing a world where survival hinges on a willingness to outdo evil. Sasquatch. This little-known horror flick is a peculiar entry into the Bigfoot genre. From 1975, Sasquatch, also known as Sasquatch, reportedly focused on a town terrorized by a monstrous creature lurking in the woods, picking off residents one by one. Described as a mix between creature feature and folk horror, it was shown only a handful of times in rural theaters, mainly in drive-ins, before vanishing. Little remains of the film aside from a few grainy posters and production stills. Bigfoot lore is already creepy, but Sasquatch had a unique, supposedly unsettling take that fans of Lost Media believe could rival other classic creature horror films. Squirrels from 2014. Imagine a horror movie where squirrels become the menace. Yes, that was actually the premise for Squirrels, a film that never made it past the development stage. It was pitched as a horror comedy with mutated squirrels attacking humans in a small town, turning the natural world upside down in gruesome and bizarre ways. Directed by the same director of Night Watch and Wanted, Squirrels promised to be as absurd as it was terrifying. Early concept art and production stills showed oversized rabid squirrels tearing through town, creating a sense of impending doom mixed with campy horror. The Black Cauldron, 1985, deleted scenes. Although The Black Cauldron is technically a Disney film, it deserves a mention because it's one of the darkest animated movies the company ever produced. Based on Welsh mythology, the story involves an evil cauldron with the power to resurrect the dead, leading to scenes that frightened young viewers and even a few adults. The deleted scenes from this film supposedly featured far more intense imagery, including a more detailed look at the cauldron's reanimated zombie army. Disney executives reportedly panicked at early test screenings, forcing animators to cut several minutes of footage to make it more palatable. Horror fans are drawn to this lost footage, imagining just how dark Disney could have taken it if they kept the original scenes. The Ghost Breaker, 1914. This silent horror comedy starred H.B. Warner and revolved around a cursed mansion and a series of spooky events that were more supernatural thriller than outright horror. It was one of the first horror films to feature a haunted house setting, making it a pioneer of sorts in ghost-themed cinema. Tragically, The Ghost Breaker has been lost for over a century, with only promotional material surviving. Because it combined mystery, comedy, and horror elements, fans of classic horror wonder what kind of atmosphere it conjured, and if it might have influenced later haunted house films. It's a tantalizing prospect, watching the earliest rendition of a haunted house setting that set the stage for all future ghost stories. An American Werewolf in London, Uncut version. An American Werewolf in London is legendary for its groundbreaking makeup and transformation scenes, courtesy of Rick Baker's iconic special effects. However, there's rumored to be an uncut version that goes even further into the macabre. This extended cut allegedly showcases more of David's gruesome transformation and additional scenes that delve into his mental breakdown as he grapples with his werewolf curse. Fans have long speculated that these moments could offer even more insight into David's tragic fate, with rumors of extra violent dream sequences that hint at his inevitable descent into madness. Horror fans cherish the released version, but the uncut version has become kind of a holy grail, as many hope for a more harrowing look at David's journey into lycanthropy. Being a werewolf, whatever. Carrie, 1976. Deleted scenes. The original Carrie, based on Stephen King's novel, became an instant horror classic. However, some scenes were removed to streamline the pacing and tone. These lost scenes supposedly add depth to Carrie's character and the bleakness of her relationship with her mother. In one rumored scene, Carrie experiences visions foreshadowing her prom night disaster, showing her powers intensifying in disturbing ways. Another supposedly extends the prom night massacre, highlighting the sheer chaos and terror the director Brian De Palma originally envisioned. Fans of Carrie are fascinated by these deleted moments, imagining how they might add layers of empathy and horror to Carrie's descent. The deleted scenes have been hinted at in production notes, but no complete footage has surfaced, leaving fans to wonder what might have made the film even more haunting. Carrie 2013 deleted scenes. The 2013 Carrie remake also had several scenes removed, mainly to create a leaner narrative. These cut scenes were rumored to show Carrie's power developing in more detail, emphasizing her alienation and the psychological horror of her newfound telekinesis. One particularly intense deleted scene allegedly depicted Carrie lashing out against her mother in a shocking moment of revenge that was ultimately deemed too dark. While the remake received mixed reviews, fans of Carrie lore are curious about what these lost moments could reveal about the reimagined story. Some feel the additional scenes might have given Chloe Grace Moretz's Carrie even more depth, potentially shifting perceptions of the remake. But I guess we'll never know, man. Next up we got The Ghoul from 1933. One of the lesser known classics, The Ghoul stars Boris Karloff as a professor obsessed with the afterlife who, after death, returns to wreak havoc. The film was thought lost until a copy was found in the 1980s, but it's still rumored that these additional scenes might exist, making Karloff's character even darker and more menacing. These lost scenes supposedly include more of his resurrection and some unsettling moments where he confronts his former students. Given Karloff's fame in horror, fans are intrigued by the idea of a version that goes even further into the character's twisted psyche, wondering what Karloff's portrayal might reveal about life, death, and madness. Next up we got Martin from 1977 Extended Cut. George A. Romero's Martin is a unique vampire story about a young man who believes he's a vampire, blending horror with psychological complexity. The extended cut reportedly dives even further into Martin's troubled psyche, showing more of his struggles with his thirst for blood and his confusion about his own identity. This longer version allegedly contains scenes where Martin contemplates his own vampiric nature, exploring the line between mental illness and the supernatural. Fans of Romero's work are eager to see this cut, believing it could reveal a darker, even more introspective take on Martin's character. This extended version would likely offer an even richer character study. Pretty cool. My Bloody Valentine, 1981, deleted scenes. My Bloody Valentine is a slasher classic known for its grisly kills and intense atmosphere, but in its original form, the movie was reportedly even gorier. Due to censorship concerns, the filmmakers were forced to cut several graphic death scenes, which have since become a legend. These lost scenes supposedly showcase even more brutal kills, reinforcing the horror of the film's mining town setting. A lot of fans of horror are obsessed with this idea of restoring the full brutality, believing that these scenes would elevate the tension and the horror factor significantly. Though some footage has resurfaced in special editions, there's hope that more might still exist, waiting to plunge viewers deeper into the chilling world of Valentine Bluffs. Grizzly 2, 1983 work print. Grizzly 2, The Predator, also known as Grizzly 2, The Concert, is a bizarre horror film with a tumultuous production history. The film's premise involves a giant grizzly bear terrorizing a rock concert, blending creature feature elements with concert footage and a lot of 80s camp. Filming was plagued by funding issues and it was ultimately shelved upon completion. However, a rough work print has been circulating, providing a glimpse into what could have been. Fans of So Bad It's Good horror are fascinated by this pretty odd mashup hoping that a complete version might eventually emerge. Cherry Falls 2000 Uncensored version. Cherry Falls is an early 2000s slasher with an unusual twist. Instead of the killer targeting sexually active teens, they go after virgins. This subversive take on the genre was controversial enough, but the real intrigue comes from its original uncut version. Director Jeffrey Wright originally delivered a much gorier, darker cut, but the studio demanded edits to avoid an NC-17 rating. In particular, scenes involving the graphic murders and a climactic orgy sequence were trimmed down considerably. While some of the cut footage has been discussed by those involved and a few snippets have resurfaced in rough form, the fully censored version has never been released. Fans of the film remain frustrated, wondering how much more shocking and effective the film could have been if left intact. High Spirits, 1988. Neil Jordan's original version. Neil Jordan's High Spirits was envisioned as a quirky, dark comedy with supernatural elements, but what ended up on screen was a much more family-friendly film than Jordan had intended. Originally, Jordan aimed for something that leaned more into the spooky and risque elements of the story involving ghosts and haunted castles. The studio, however, had other ideas and re-edited the film to appeal to a wider audience, cutting out much of the darker humor and ghostly antics. The result was a disjointed film that left Jordan unhappy. His original version, which he claims was closer to his original vision, has never surfaced, and High Spirits remains a film that feels odd with itself, tonally inconsistent, and lacking the edge that Jordan had intended. Deadly Friend, 1987, original. Wes Craven's Deadly Friend is one of the more unusual films in his catalog. Originally intended as a sci-fi horror drama about a teenage genius who revives his dead friend using robotics, the movie was meant to focus on the emotional consequences of bringing someone back from the dead. However, after A Nightmare on Elm Street made Craven synonymous with gore and slasher films, the studio demanded significant changes. They insisted on more violence and horror elements, leading to the inclusion of several grisly death scenes that feel tonally out of place with the rest of the movie. The original cut, which was much more about the emotional and ethical dilemmas of playing God, has never been released. Craven himself was unhappy with the final product, feeling that the heart of his story was lost amidst the added gore. Nobody Ordered Love, 1972. Nobody Ordered Love is one of those films that didn't just fade into obscurity, it was deliberately erased. Directed by Robert Hartford Davis, this British drama was about a film crew making a World War I love story, but things started going wrong in a meta kind of way. After its original release, Hartford Davis reportedly became dissatisfied with the film and requested that all known prints be destroyed. To this day, no copies of the film have resurfaced, and it's become one of the most sought-after pieces of lost British cinema. The idea of a director erasing their own work is rare, which only adds to the mystique surrounding Nobody Ordered Love. Son of Frankenstein, 1939, color footage. Son of Frankenstein is a black and white classic, but color test footage was shot for the film before the decision was made to stick with black and white. Universal briefly toyed with the idea of shooting the film in color to capitalize on the visual spectacle of the Frankenstein monster, but ultimately the decision was made to retain the atmospheric black and white look, which was more in line with the earlier films in the series. The color footage has never been found, but film historians speculate that it could still be sitting in a vault somewhere, waiting to be uncovered. The idea of seeing Boris Karloff's iconic monster in color during the golden age of horror is tantalizing to fans of Universal monsters. Friday the 13th, Part 13, 2017, production material. The elusive Friday the 13th Part 13 has been in development limbo for years, with various scripts and ideas tossed around since 2009. In 2017, there was some pretty serious momentum, with the production start date set and concept art, storyboards, and scripts being circulated. This version was intended to bring Jason Voorhees back to his roots, focusing more on the mystery and terror of his character rather than just the slasher formula. However, due to rights issues between Paramount and Warner Bros., the project was shelved. Some production material has leaked online, offering glimpses of what could have been a return to the eerie, atmospheric horror of the early films, rather than just blood and guts. Fans continue to hope for a resolution to the legal issues that Jason can finally return to Camp Crystal Lake. Tales from the Crypt, Dead Easy, 1997. Dead Easy was intended to be a spin-off of the Tales from the Crypt film series, focusing on voodoo and the supernatural in New Orleans. This would have been the second film in the series after Demon Knight, but the project was cancelled due to various production problems. The story was supposed to involve a young couple getting caught up in dark rituals and ghostly occurrences in the French Quarter. While some concept art and scripts have surfaced over the years, the film was never completed, and most of the production materials have remained under wraps. Fans of the Tales from the Crypt series have long been curious about this lost film, as it promised a unique blend of supernatural horror and the show's trademark dark humor. My Friend the Devil, 1922. This silent film, directed by Harry Lockman, is now considered lost, but it was a supernatural drama involving a man who makes a deal with the devil to save his own soul. Lockman was a painter turned director, and the film was said to be visually stunning, with dreamlike sequences and intricate set designs. Unfortunately, like many silent films of the era, My Friend the Devil was not preserved, and no known prints have survived. The film's themes of morality, temptation, and the supernatural were pretty ahead of its time, making its loss even more tragic for historians and silent film enthusiasts alike. The Rocky Horror Picture Show, 1975, Open Matte version. The Open Matte version of Rocky Horror Picture Show is a rare version of the cult classic, which features a full-frame presentation of the film, showing more of the top and bottom of the image that was cropped out for its theatrical release. This version was used for television broadcasts, but the increased visibility of things like boom mics and set elements not meant to be seen gives it a behind-the-scenes feel that fascinates diehard fans. Although it's technically not lost, it's an oddity that hasn't been made widely available in home releases, making it a must-see for completionists who want to see Rocky Horror in all its unpolished glory. Axum, 1992, Original Cut. Axum is one of the most infamous low-budget horror films ever made, and its reputation comes largely from its shoddy production values and incoherent plot. However, the original cut of the film was said to be even more disjointed, with much of the dialogue and sound missing entirely. The film was re-edited for its eventual release, but rumors persist that an even rougher, earlier version of the film exists somewhere. Given Axum's notorious reputation, finding this original cut would likely be more of a curiosity than anything else, but it remains an example of how even the most poorly received films can develop a cult following due to their bizarre history. A Blind Bargain, 1922. This is another lost silent film starring Lon Chaney, known for his ability to transform into grotesque characters through the use of makeup. In A Blind Bargain, Chaney played both a mad scientist and a disfigured, ape-like creature. The film's plot involved medical experiments, human transformation, and the ethical dilemmas of scientific discovery, classic themes for the horror genre. Unfortunately, A Blind Bargain was lost in the infamous MGM Vault Fire of 1965, which destroyed many early silent films. The film's loss is significant because it was one of Chaney's more challenging dual roles, and it would have added to the legacy of him as the Man of a Thousand Faces. Cursed, 2005, original version. Wes Craven's Cursed went through a notoriously troubled production, with the original version of the film being scrapped and reshot almost entirely. Originally intended to be a darker, more violent werewolf movie with practical effects, the studio demanded changes that resulted in much of the original footage being abandoned. Early cuts featured a different cast, a more complex story, and practical werewolf effects by American Werewolf and London legend Rick Baker. However, the studio wanted a more mainstream, PG-13 friendly film, leading to the use of CGI and a less ambitious plot. The original version of Cursed has never been released, but it remains a subject of fascination. Okay, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this one because it's not even in the alphabet that we use here in America. It is a Russian movie. You see it on screen, yeah, from 1990. This Soviet horror film, translated as Hour of the Werewolf, is one of the more obscure pieces of lost cinema. Produced during the final years of the Soviet Union, it was a dark, psychological horror story involving a werewolf haunting a remote village. The film was reportedly shown at a few film festivals locally, but never received a wide release. Much like other Soviet-era horror films, it was considered too grim and unsettling for general audiences. The political climate at the time also likely contributed to its disappearance. So yeah, as of today, no known copies of this movie have surfaced. The Amusement Park, 1975. The Amusement Park is an unusual entry in George A. Romero's filmography. Originally commissioned by the Lutheran Society as a public service announcement about elder abuse, the film ended up going far too disturbing for its intended purpose. The film is a surreal, nightmarish exploration of aging, with Romero using a decrepit amusement park as a metaphor for society's treatment of the elderly. The film was shelved for decades and thought to be lost, but it was rediscovered in 2018 and finally released in 2021. The restored version has been praised as a haunting, socially conscious horror film, showcasing Romero's talent for blending social commentary with the horror genre. The Stuff, 1985, deleted scenes. Larry Cohen's The Stuff is a cult classic, but several scenes were cut from the final version. These scenes included more background on the corporate conspiracy behind the stuff, and extended sequences showing the addictive effects of the stuff. One of the most infamous scenes that was deleted involved a character having a more graphic and violent reaction to consuming the stuff, but it was cut to avoid an X rating. Some of the deleted footage has been recovered and included in special editions, but other scenes remain lost, sadly. Evil Dead, 1981 original tape scene. Sam Raimi's Evil Dead is a horror classic, but the original tape scene, where the characters first listened to the recordings that unleashed the demons, was much longer and more detailed than early cuts. This scene, which sets the entire plot in motion, originally featured more details and backstory about the Necronomicon and the history of the cabin. However, it was cut down to keep the film's pacing tight. While some of the footage has been included in various home releases, the full uncut version of this pivotal scene has never been released. Fans of Evil Dead have speculated about how much more detail the uncut version could have added to the mythology of the series. Five Nights at Freddy's film's early scripts. The Five Nights at Freddy's film adaptation has been stuck in development for years, with several different scripts reportedly written and rejected. Early versions of the film's script were said to be much darker and closely tied to the lore of the video games, with a focus on psychological horror, which honestly, I think it should have been more of that. However, as the project bounced between studios and creative teams, these scripts were shelved, and yeah, we got what we got. Which is still good, but... And with that now, we have Layer 4. The Curse of Frankenstein 1957 acid bath scene. Hammer Films' The Curse of Frankenstein helped define the British horror genre, bringing a new level of color and gore to the Frankenstein mythos. One particularly infamous scene, which involved the monster being killed in an acid bath, was reportedly more graphic in its original form. Early test screenings apparently included a more explicit depiction of the monster's body disintegrating in the acid, but Hammer toned down the visuals to avoid getting into trouble with censors. The acid bath scene that made it to theaters is still gruesome, but not as intense as originally intended. Rumors persist that the original uncut footage might still exist in Hammer's archives, though it is yet to surface. The scene's impact, even in its edited form, has left fans wondering just how far Hammer was willing to push the envelope with his new approach to horror. UFO Abduction 1989. Often referred to as the McPherson tape, UFO Abduction is one of the earliest examples of found footage horror, predating the Blair Witch Project by a decade. Directed by Dean Alioto, the film presents itself as home video footage of a family being terrorized by aliens in their home during a birthday party. While the film achieved cult status for its realism and low-budget charm, its original version was long considered lost after a warehouse fire destroyed the master tapes. For years, only the poor quality copies circulated in the bootleg market, adding to the mystery and urban legend status of the film. Alioto later remade the movie with a higher budget in 1998, titled Alien Abduction Incident in Lake County, but the raw, unsettling original remained elusive until it was finally rediscovered in the 2000s. Amanita Pestilence, 1963. This is an incredibly obscure 1963 horror short that few have seen, but has been described as a surreal and experimental film focused on the hallucinogenic effects of deadly mushrooms. Directed by an underground filmmaker whose identity remains disputed, the film reportedly played at a few small festivals and disappeared shortly afterward. The title refers to Amanita muscaria, a type of poisonous mushroom, and the film allegedly explores the breakdown of reality for a group of people who ingest this fungi. Some rumors claim the film had disturbing, almost hypnotic imagery that was considered too avant-garde for mainstream audiences. Whether the film ever truly existed or was more of an urban legend remains debated in cult horror circles, but its mysterious status keeps it in discussions of lost experimental cinema. Shrey 27. 2011. Stray 27, directed by experimental filmmaker Kasper Strack, is a disturbing and visceral piece that delves into the psychological effects of isolation and torture. This film was created in collaboration with an artist named Diamanda Galas, whose haunting operatic voice provided the film's soundtrack. Though Stray 27 is not lost in the traditional sense, its disturbing content featuring themes of psychological experimentation and intense body horror has made it notoriously difficult to access. Screenings were rare and limited to avant-garde festivals, where it was shown as part of a multimedia art installation. There was never a mainstream release, and because the film's controversial and experimental nature, it's become hard to find in recent years. Those who have seen it describe it as a deeply unsettling experience, a film not meant for casual viewing. Nightbreed, 1990, The Cannibal Cut. Clive Barker's Nightbreed was initially a massive commercial failure, but over the years, it's gained a loyal cult following. The original film was heavily cut by the studio, which removed significant portions of the story and darkened the overall tone, focusing more on horror and violence than on Barker's original vision of a monster-filled fantasy. The Cannibal Cut refers to an extended version of the film that restores much of Barker's original footage, including character development and an entirely different ending. For years, this version was only available through rare screenings at festivals, where the longer, more faithful version garnered positive reactions. Finally, after a strong fan campaign, the Cannibal Cut was partially restored and released on Blu-ray as the director's cut, though some footage still remains lost or in poor quality. Cube alternate ending. Cube is known for its unsettling premise. Strangers trapped in a deadly mechanical maze, but it originally had a very different ending. In early versions of the script, the film ended in a far more bleak and existential manner, with no survivors making it out alive. The alternate ending would have emphasized the idea that the cube is an inescapable prison, a metaphor for life's futility. However, after test audiences reacted negatively, the filmmakers opted for a more hopeful conclusion, with one character escaping. While no footage of this original ending has surfaced, fans of the film often debate how different the tone and message of Cube might have been if the darker ending had stayed. Jaws' Alex Kintner uncut death scene. Steven Spielberg's Jaws is already considered one of the most famous horror-ish movies of all time, but the death of young Alex Kintner would have made it even more shocking. Early versions of the scene reportedly showed the boy's brutal death in far more graphic detail, with extended shots of the shark attack, including Kintner being pulled underwater in a cloud of blood. Test audiences found this sequence too disturbing, especially considering the victim's age, leading Spielberg to trim the scene for pacing and sensitivity. While the edited version is still harrowing, the uncut scene remains a point of fascination, so it's interesting because it's weird to think that Spielberg would go that far in a movie. Next up we have La Poseída from 1991. La Poseída is an obscure Chilean horror film from the early 90s centered around a young woman possessed by a demonic entity in a rural village. The film reportedly drew inspiration from real-life possession cases and had a gritty documentary style. It was only shown at a few local festivals before disappearing entirely, leading to speculation that the film was either pulled due to its disturbing content or simply never received proper distribution. Despite its brief existence, La Poseída has garnered a reputation among horror enthusiasts, particularly in South America, as a lost gem of the early 90s. The Creature from the Black Lagoon canceled sequels and reboots production material. The Creature from the Black Lagoon spawned 2 direct sequels in the 1950s, but Universal Pictures had plans for far more. Several attempts were made to reboot or extend the Creature series, including a 1980s attempt at a remake produced by John Landis and a planned 90s reboot that would have updated the monster for modern audiences. Scripts were written, storyboards created, and even creature designs floated around, but these projects never made it to production due to creative disagreements and changes in studio priorities. In 2017, Universal's failed, quote, Dark Universe reboot series, which was meant to revive its classic monster films, also had plans for a Creature remake that fell through. Fans continue to dig up concept art and production notes from these various failed attempts, dreaming of what might have been if the Gill Man had returned. Phantasmagoria. The Visions of Lewis Carroll. This project, which was supposed to be directed by Marilyn Manson, generated a lot of buzz before it quietly disappeared. Phantasmagoria was envisioned as a dark, surreal, and nightmarish interpretation of the life and imagination of Alice in Wonderland author Lewis Carroll. Manson, known for his gothic aesthetic and shock value, seemed like the perfect person to bring such a strange vision to life. However, despite a trailer being released, the film never moved past early production stages. Rumors suggest that the project fell apart due to financing issues as well as concerns over Manson's controversial public persona at the time, sadly. Next up we have Sadistic Bitch. This underground Japanese pinku film, pinku referring to a subgenre of Japanese exploitation cinema, gained notoriety for its extreme depictions of violence and sexual sadism. Sadistic Bitch is almost impossible to find today, though it did circulate in underground film markets in Japan and the West shortly after its release. The film, like many others in the pinku genre, was made on a shoestring budget and contained extremely graphic content, blurring the lines between art and actual exploitation. Its controversial nature led to it being pulled from circulation not long after its release, and has since faded into obscurity. Little Shop of Horrors unused and unreleased production material. The Little Shop of Horrors we know and we love, particularly from the 1986 musical version, almost had a drastically different, much darker ending. Originally, the Plant Audrey 2 kills everyone, including Seymour, and takes over the world in a massive sequence of destruction. Test audiences, however, didn't respond well to the bleakness, leading to the creation of the more upbeat ending where Seymour and Audrey survive. The original ending was shot and completed, and for years it was considered lost. Some of the material was eventually released in special editions, but much of the unused footage, including alternate designs and extended death scenes, remains unreleased. Fans continued to campaign for a full restoration of the darker original cut, which would be pretty cool to see. Hellraiser deleted scenes. Clive Barker's Hellraiser is already known for pushing boundaries, but several scenes were cut to avoid an X rating, particularly those involving more graphic depictions of the Cenobites' sadistic tortures. One famous deleted scene involved a longer, more explicit version of Frank's resurrection, which was deemed too disturbing for audiences. Additionally, several violent moments, including the hook-ripping sequences and scenes of flesh being torn apart, were trimmed for both pacing and censorship reasons. Some of these deleted scenes have been included in DVD releases, but others remain missing, much to the disappointment of Hellraiser fans who want to see Barker's original vision in all its grotesque glory. Go to Sleep, The True Story of Jeff. Go to Sleep, The True Story of Jeff from 2014 was a low-budget horror film based on the infamous internet creepypasta Jeff the Killer. The film aimed to explore the backstory of Jeff, a boy who, after a series of tragic events, becomes a psychotic killer with a disturbing smile. While the movie tried to capitalize on Jeff's internet fame, it was plagued with production issues, leading to a limited release and poor reception. Many fans of the Jeff the Killer story were curious to see it, but Go to Sleep failed to live up to the hype with its low-quality effects and disjointed plot. There were rumors that an even earlier version of the script existed with a darker, more psychological take on Jeff's descent into madness, but the film was ultimately re-edited into a standard slasher. While it's technically not lost, Go to Sleep has become obscure, and finding a complete, unedited version has proven difficult. The Real Blair Witch 2003 / Blair Witch Kidnapping. Following the success of the Blair Witch Project, there was a surge of interest in, quote, real paranormal investigations and urban legends. The Real Blair Witch was a documentary-style film produced in 2003 that explored the infamous Blair Witch urban legend but took things in a darker direction by claiming there was a real kidnapping tied to the legend. The film played heavily on the found footage style that made the original Blair Witch Project so iconic, blending fact and fiction to create a sense of dread. However, it never gained wide distribution and became somewhat lost in the wave of Blair Witch-inspired media. Copies are extremely hard to find, and it's become a rare curiosity for fans of the Blair Witch lore. Children of the Corn Blue Man Scene. Children of the Corn, adapted from Stephen King's short story, originally included a subplot involving a character known as the Blue Man, a figure crucified in the cornfields by the children. In the original script, this character was meant to be a more significant figure, possibly a police officer or priest who tried to stand up to the cult before being sacrificed. However, this subplot was scrapped during editing, and only vague references to the Blue Man remain in the final cut. Fans have long speculated about the lost footage, which would have added more depth to the film's portrayal of the sinister child cult. Would have been cool to see, low-key. Jeff the Killer 2016. In 2016, another attempt to adapt Jeff the Killer was launched. This version was intended to be a more polished, higher-budget production than Go to Sleep, aiming to bring a more cinematic interpretation of Jeff's story to life. However, like many fan projects, it encountered numerous production hurdles, including legal battles over the rights to the Jeff the Killer character. The film was eventually shelved, and only a few clips and trailers ever surfaced. The story of Jeff the Killer has proven difficult to adapt successfully, and this 2016 version became yet another unrealized vision, sadly. 7. Decapitated head scene. David Fincher's Seven is famous for its brutal, disturbing ending, but the film originally contained an even more graphic version of the climactic scene. In the theatrical release, we never actually see what's in the box, but it's heavily implied that it's the decapitated head of Brad Pitt's character's wife. There were discussions about including a more explicit shot of the head in early versions, but the filmmakers ultimately decided to leave it to the viewer's imagination, which arguably made the scene even more effective. While the original footage of the decapitated head reportedly exists, it has never been officially released, adding to the unsettling atmosphere of this film's finale. Final Destination Alex Browning helicopter decapitation scene. The Final Destination franchise is known for its inventive death scenes, but one scene that didn't make it into the first film involved a helicopter decapitating the main character, Alex Browning. This sequence was reportedly filmed, but ultimately cut for pacing and budget reasons. In this version, Death's elaborate plan would have resulted in a helicopter accident that takes Alex's life in a graphic fashion. Although the scene was scrapped, some production stills and storyboards have surfaced, teasing fans about what could have been one of the franchise's most creative and gory deaths. Darkland, Been Drowned. The Been Drowned story, which originated as a creepypasta about a haunted The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask cartridge, inspired a 2016 film adaptation titled Darkland. The film sought to bring the eerie atmosphere of the original story to life, mixing found footage with internet horror culture. But it was never made. Some footage was shot and clips have leaked online, but the film was never completed or released, sadly. Child's Play production material of canceled reboot. In the mid-2000s, before the 2019 reboot of Child's Play, there were plans to produce a different version of the franchise reboot that would have taken a darker and more psychological approach to Chucky's origins. This cancelled reboot was meant to delve deeper into the mind of Charles Lee Ray, the killer whose soul inhabits the doll, showing more of his backstory and exploring his descent into madness. Early scripts and production material teased a version of Chucky that would have been less comedic and more terrifying. However, this never actually happened, and then we ended up getting the 2019 reboot instead. The Blair Witch Project Amazon deleted scenes. The success of the Blair Witch Project spawned a lot of additional content, including deleted scenes and alternate takes that were used to deepen the mythology of the Blair Witch. Some of these deleted scenes were included in various DVD and VHS releases, but others were lost or never officially released, particularly those intended for the early internet marketing campaign on Amazon. These scenes, which were shot but not included in the final cut, were intended to give more background on the town that it was in and the legend of the Blair Witch herself. While a few of these scenes have been found and shared by fans, a lot of them are still missing. The Omen, 2016, 13,500 feet of film footage. The 2016 version of The Omen reportedly had a significant amount of footage, over 13,500 feet of it, that was cut from the final product. This footage contained additional scenes exploring the backstory of Damien, as well as extended death sequences that were considered too graphic for mainstream audiences. While some of the scenes were restored in home media releases, much of the footage has remained lost. Fans of the Omen franchise have speculated about how these deleted scenes might have fleshed out the mythology of the Antichrist and added to the film's horror atmosphere, but as of now, most of this material remains unseen. #iKiller. This 2014 found footage horror film played on themes of social media, obsession, and murder, following a group of teenagers who discover an online killer streaming their murders live. #iKiller generated some buzz for its timely premise, but never received a wide release. Some early screenings were held at festivals, but the film disappeared from circulation shortly afterward. It has since become a lost film of the digital age, with little evidence of its existence beyond promotional material and a few trailers. The film's critique of social media voyeurism makes it an intriguing case study for fans of modern horror, but tracking down a copy has proven nearly impossible. A Clockwork Orange deleted scenes. Stanley Kubrick's A Clockwork Orange already shocked audiences with its violent and dystopian vision, but there were several deleted scenes that were cut before the film's release. One such scene involved a more graphic depiction of Alex's rehabilitation, where his conditioning is tested by forcing him to witness real violence without being able to react. Another scene involved extended sequences of the Droog's violent rampages, which Kubrick cut to avoid an X rating. Some of these deleted scenes have been described in interviews and production notes, but none of the actual footage has surfaced. While Paris Sleeps, 1923. This silent melodrama starring Lon Chaney is another lost film from the early 1920s. While Paris Sleeps told the story of a sculptor driven mad by unrequited love, leading him to kidnap a woman and keep her captive in his studio. Like many of Chaney's early films, While Paris Sleeps showcased his ability to portray disturbed, obsessive characters. But no prints of the film survived, and only a few stills from the movie remain, sadly. Mr. Sardonicus' merciful ending. William Castle, the king of theatrical gimmicks, gave audiences a choice when it came to the ending of Mr. Sardonicus. The film featured a, quote, punishment poll where viewers could vote on whether the villain, Mr. Sardonicus, should be given a merciful or cruel ending. While Castle claimed that the audience always chose punishment, it's being suggested that a merciful ending was filmed but never shown, as the cruel ending was considered more satisfying. No footage of this has ever been found, but it's still pretty interesting to think about. And there we have it, end of Layer 4, guys. Now, for Layer 5, I have my friend Mediaadoration on. He makes Iceberg videos and stuff. Go check him out, and he's covering Layer 5, so back to him.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Before this segment begins, I just want to give a huge thanks to Poi for allowing me to be a part of this video, and I want to give a quick introduction on who I am. For those who don't know, my name is Elijah from the channel Mediaadoration, and this whole next layer is edited by yours truly. So if you enjoy what you see, it's kind of the similar style I stick to on my own personal channel. So if you like what you see, maybe stop by. You don't have to, but that'd be pretty cool, you know? But thanks so much to Poi for allowing me to be a part of this. It truly means a lot, and I'm not going to keep talking because my segment's already probably way too long. But yeah, I hope I see you guys maybe on my channel, and thanks for sticking around, and I hope you guys don't leave and you check out my last segment here. Falling is an independent drama film from 2008, the movie being about a married couple moving to LA to pursue their dreams, until life kicks them where it hurts and forces the couple to take on different careers. The husband becomes a freelance stringer filming violent crimes, and his wife tries to become an actress, doing so by having an affair with the casting director, causing their marriage to crumble. The movie is partially found with it not being able to be viewed by the public, but multiple trailers are still around, alongside a few clips that were posted to the movie on YouTube before they later got taken down. It actually turns out that this movie caused a little bit of drama in a way, due to the writer, director, and main actor Richard Dutcher suing the studio behind the 2015 movie Nightcrawler due to its similarities with Falling. And it turned out that the judge behind the case also agreed that the movie shared way too many similarities, and so he allowed the case to go before a jury. However, due to multiple problems, such as bankruptcy of Open Road Films and delays of the case, Richard Dutcher dismissed the whole thing, claiming that even though the movie shared many similarities, the movies just had much different tones, and movies that are going to be about stringers are more than likely going to have similar ideas. Deep Blue Sea is a 1999 sci-fi horror film about a group of researchers harvesting shark DNA, looking for a cure for Alzheimer's until one of the sharks go crazy and ends up attacking the group. The ending of the movie has a character named Dr. Susan die from a shark, while another main character ends up killing the shark. The original ending, however, was a bit different, with Dr. Susan actually surviving and killing the shark herself. However, many people who were shown the movie months before the screening hated this ending, considering Dr. Susan was sort of the bad guy all along, and did not deserve to survive, let alone get the killing shot. Moviegoers were actually so upset over this ending they wrote "kill the bitch" on test cards. Obviously, due to the backlash, the ending scene was reshot and was replaced with what is in the movie today. And as of today, the only media we have of this final scene is a single picture that shows Dr. Susan and Charter Blake sharing a kiss. Doom cancelled film production material refers to lost media on the cancelled adaptations of the first Doom games. Shortly after Doom 2's release, a few companies reached out to the team behind Doom wanting to create a movie. Some of these companies being Dimension Films, Universal Pictures, and even some Disney companies. But ultimately, Universal got the film rights and put Ivan Reitman in charge of the movie, who is well known for being behind the Ghostbusters series and a few Arnold Schwarzenegger movies like Twins and Kindergarten Cop. The film was stuck in development hell, sadly, with it getting thrown between different companies and ideas being scrapped, some of these ideas being sketches and models of the demons and creatures from the game, which actually ended up being sold on an eBay auction in 2005. Only one script was known to be fully completed, and anything to do with the original adaptation was long gone, and it wouldn't be till 2005 till fans got a Doom movie starring Dwayne Johnson. So this Doom movie ultimately took a decade to come out, which I'm sure it was well worth the wait considering the movie has an 18% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is somehow 68% less than Cuties. My god, what is wrong with critics? You know what? That movie should be on this list, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Not only should it be deemed a horror movie, but that film should be just lost in general. That movie shouldn't even exist. I don't know why it doesn't sit at an 80. Oh my god! Rainbow Factory was a 2017 fan-animated film based off of My Little Pony. To be more exact, a creepypasta called Rainbow Factory. The creepypasta explains that young Pegasi who are unable to meet certain criteria are harvested for their colors in a facility known as the Rainbow Factory. The creepypasta is pretty big in the MLP fandom, with many different media being made, such as animations, songs, stories, and of course, movies such as this one. The movie was in the works from 2013 to 2017 until Hasbro sent the team a cease and desist, with the only known surviving footage being a preview of this movie on YouTube that was released during something called PonyCon. The preview consists of ponies being shown attending a flight class. One of these ponies flies pretty well until falling out of the sky, and that's where the preview ends. Although not my cup of tea, many fans of MLP were extremely upset with Hasbro for sending the letter and stopping the film from being created. Saw 4 Vagrant Glass Coffin scene refers to a deleted scene from Saw 4 that depicts a homeless man being trapped in a glass box. With glass everywhere, the victim would have to maneuver inside the box to retrieve a key to free himself, while glass would cut him as he struggled. The reasoning behind the deletion of the scene is more than likely due to it not fitting in the story naturally. The scene wouldn't make much sense because why would Jigsaw torture a homeless man, who we wouldn't even have seen the backstory of in the movie? I do like the idea behind the trap though, being a death by 1,000 cuts type deal, and as of right now, the only viewable media we have of this deleted scene is a few screenshots. In 1985, Cannon Films would try to make a Spider-Man horror film starring Tom Cruise as Spider-Man, and the director would be Tobe Hooper, the director behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The film was about Peter Parker being experimented on and turned into a spider hybrid monster. There's a few stories on why this film got cancelled, one of which is due to the financial failures of Cannon Films, but more than likely the reason it was cancelled was due to Stan Lee, the creator of Spider-Man, stepping in and making it very clear he was not a fan of the script and overall direction of the film. So obviously the movie was cancelled and never made it past pre-production. It is crazy to imagine a world where the first big Spider-Man film was a horror film starring Tom Cruise. The Thing practical cut refers to the original film's creatures being done almost entirely practical using only a little help with green screen. The whole movie was made this way with only practical effects. It wasn't until later on almost all of these practical effects were replaced with CGI. Along with a lot of the effects being replaced, some scenes were changed entirely, with the practical cut having Kate and Adam, 2 characters from the movie, meeting at a cafe instead of their workplace. Another change that was much bigger was the ending, with the practical cut having Kate battle an imitation of the original alien that piloted the spacecraft that crash-landed. In retaliation to their work being covered up, the team behind the practical effects amalgamated and released a Kickstarter for their own movie Harbinger Down, a spiritual successor to The Thing. However, the movie received pretty bad reviews. As for anything we have of the practical cut of the movie, there was a trailer for the movie in 2010, released at the New York Comic Con, that shows a few differences, but nothing major was shown. Voodoo Heartbeat is about a rogue scientist that gets turned into a fanged beast out for blood. The film was lost for a good while until in 2023 a Blu-ray box set called Vinegar Syndrome's Lost Picture Show was released. That had 10 lost films in it, with one of the movies being Voodoo Heartbeat. The movie is nothing special, with it having mostly negative reviews and overall not being that interesting even for its time. Camelot scene from War of the Worlds is a cut scene from the movie that depicts the main trio passing through an estate before almost being spotted by a tripod and seeking shelter behind a car. During this scene, the tripods can be seen abducting people hiding in the nearby homes. The scene was almost fully finished but was cut weeks before post-production finished. The reason the scene was scrapped is unknown, and the only footage we have of the scene is screenshots and concept art involving some very early CGI and CGI that was almost completed. It's a shame it was scrapped, and it's an even bigger shame it wasn't in any extended cuts or re-releases of the movie. X, The Man with X-Ray Eyes, is a 1963 horror movie about a man who, over the span of the movie, gains stronger and stronger vision powers, slowly driving him insane. The original ending depicts the man blinding himself to end his suffering. However, due to a mishap coming from the book Danse Macabre by Stephen King, the book claims that there was an alternative ending to the movie that showed the main character blinding himself, only for him to then scream in agony claiming that he can still see. Although a pretty chilling ending, this ending was in fact never real. And this was confirmed in 2017 by Roger Corman, the director, when he stated that the ending never existed and that the ending was simply written by Stephen King himself. But Corman later claimed he loved that ending, and if he was ever to remake the movie, he would use that ending instead. The Manson Massacre is a horror film based off of the Charles Manson murders. This film was originally called The Cult, but gained little attention. The movie was later renamed to The Manson Massacre after Helter Skelter brought new light on Charles Manson. The film was re-released multiple times under different names, most notably The House of Bondage in 1980. An English version of the film is nowhere to be found on home media, however an English trailer does exist. And it seems as if some people speculate that Quentin Tarantino owns a print of the English version. It's obvious the film desperately tried to mooch off of the fame of Helter Skelter, with one of the movie posters claiming that Helter Skelter was only the beginning, and the Manson Massacre takes you all the way. This entry, known in English as V, is a 1909 short horror film directed by a Russian director by the name of Vasily Gostrov. The short is actually an adaptation of a short story or novel from 1835. V is a demon of sorts referred to as the King of Gnomes. The creature is unique due to his long heavy eyelids that he cannot lift by himself. But once he's able to see, he is able to see everything, so running and hiding from him is pretty much useless. The short film is lost, but we can guess what it might entail by reading the story it's based off of. An interesting fact, however, is that this was the first ever Russian horror movie, which makes it an even bigger shame knowing it's lost. Rob Zombie is a singer, songwriter, and director among many other things, who was at some point supposed to revive the Blob franchise, a horror series about a blob from space that absorbs humans and grows in size. The series first started in 1958, and Rob wanted to reboot the series, however with a new twist that even to this day he has never came forward to what it would have been. Not much info about the project has been released besides a few concepts, and this is due to Rob Zombie leaving the movie fairly early, due to him and other people working on the movie butting heads and having different opinions on what the movie should be. The movie then saw no attention till 2015, in which a whole new team was put in charge of the movie. However, this would be short-lived with nothing really happening, and as of 2024, the new director stepped down from the film. But don't go crying in the corner yet, because the film is still planned to be a thing. It's just sadly stuck in a horrible loop of development hell. Prom Night is a horror film starring Leslie Nielsen and Jamie Lee Curtis. The movie is a slasher film about a killer getting revenge on a girl who was bullied in school. What made this movie notable, however, was the soundtrack, with it consisting of a lot of disco music, all in which was made specifically for the movie. But it turns out that the soundtrack was only ever released in Japan for some reason. And although all the music nowadays can easily be found, many of the recordings apparently sound different, and aren't anywhere near as good as the original releases of the song. But to be fair, the soundtrack isn't half bad, with it being very unique for a horror slasher film. Lucifer Rising was originally created in 1973 but wasn't fully released till 1980. However, an earlier version was in production since 1966, and featured some many interesting things, such as featuring Bobby Beausoleil, an American murderer associated with the Manson family, and who was sentenced to death for the killing of Gary Hinman. The original 1966 version apparently had a lot of the footage stolen by Bobby himself, in which the story goes that he stole the footage and buried it somewhere in the desert. However, Bobby claimed he did no such thing, and the supposed footage he stole never existed in the first place. Along with the stolen footage, another cut of the movie known as the Jimmy Page cut was also lost, due to it having a very limited release in the 70s. However, this cut was found, and now all that is left to find is this supposed lost footage buried somewhere in the California desert. This entry, known in English as Will of the Dead Man or just Will of the Dead, is a 1930 Spanish film. This film is a Spanish version of the movie The Cat Creeps, both of which being lost. Both of these films are actually based off of the 1922 play The Cat and the Canary. Both the English and Spanish version of the film were shot at the same time and were made by Universal, and this was their attempt to reach an international audience. Cards of Death is a 1986 slasher film that is most notable for its rarity among collectors and movie fans. Part of its rarity is due to its Japan-only release, even though the film itself is in English, with the main reason for its Japan-only release being due to the intense gore in the film. Some of these scenes ended up getting pretty intense, such as people being crushed to death, raped, and mutilated. The plot revolves around a group of people who gamble with their lives, with people getting killed off until 2 is left, in which the winner will win a cash prize if he kills the loser. And if he fails to do so, they both end up dying. For a while, the film was extremely rare to see, since only a few collectors owned the film, providing a few screenshots. But seemingly out of nowhere, an anonymous person posted the whole movie online in 2015. The Drill Killer is a black comedy slasher film that got in a bit of trouble in the early 80s due to its graphic content, which led to the film being banned in certain places. The film wasn't available anywhere until 2010, when the film was put on video on demand. The plot is about a man named Reno slowly growing more insane as the movie continues. This is due to multiple reasons, such as his love life and financial well-being. The ending of the movie shows Reno murdering someone with a drill after fully going insane. The film wasn't too notable, especially since it was a low-budget film with a nobody cast. Eraserhead is a now classic horror movie that shot David Lynch into stardom. And even though the film at first was met with horrible reviews, many grew to like the film. The uncut version of the film was said to be 20 minutes longer, but was removed after David Lynch felt as if the 20 minutes added nothing. Any mention of the uncut version is pretty scarce, but Lynch has claimed it was real even though he typically doesn't like talking about the movie. It was stated that the full uncut version of the film was set to come out in 2000, but ultimately never did. Entity is a cancelled Slender Man film from 2013, with the only real footage of the film being its trailer. The movie was more or less a fan film rather than an actual big movie, with Victor Surge apparently helping with the film as well, which for those who don't know, Victor Surge is the creator of Slender Man. Much isn't known as to why the film was cancelled, but the biggest reason was more than likely due to Victor shutting the film down due to copyright problems. Now, it definitely would have been great to see this movie release, but based off the trailer, I can't say it looked too amazing. Yet I don't doubt it probably would have been better than the 2018 Slender Man movie that would come out just years later. Maximum Overdrive is a 1987 film that was actually directed by Stephen King, being based off the book of the same name, also being written by Stephen King himself. The film is about machines coming to life after a radiation storm. These machines come to life and try to kill their creators, with the machines mostly being vehicles such as trucks. The uncut version has a pretty lengthy amount of things that ended up getting taken out, mostly because Stephen King didn't want the film to get an X rating. Many of the things that were cut were either gore or bodily harm. Interestingly enough, this film is the one and only film directed by Stephen King himself, which I actually loved the trailer for this film, by the way, because Stephen King is in it and the whole trailer is him just telling the audience how good the film is, with him even saying,
"A lot of people have directed Stephen King novels and stories, and I finally decided if you want something done right, you ought to do it yourself."
So with that logic, I guess Stephen King done right is a 14% on Rotten Tomato and being a financial disaster. Slender Man 2018 is a dumpster fire of a movie that dealt with a lot of problems many other films have dealt with over the years. Apparently Slender Man had enough disturbing content in it that it was going to be rated R. However, scenes were deleted and taken out to lower this rating to PG-13. Another reason things were toned down and removed was due to the Slender Man stabbing that happened years before the movie, and the people behind the film didn't want to receive backlash. But cutting things did not help, with the movie still getting backlash to this day. However, this is more over the quality of the film, and not due to the stabbing or final rating. Gnomes Attack was a 2013 Australian horror film about garden gnomes wreaking havoc on people. Little is known about the film, with only a few teasers ever being released, and although this is a premise that feels like it was ripped straight out of Goosebumps, I will admit I really like the advertising and teasers of the film. These teasers were short videos that seemingly had nothing to do with the movie itself, but seems as if they are random horror clips found on YouTube, with one teaser being a police dashcam video and another being very similar to early YouTube horror videos, showing a group of teens filming a strange gnome creature walking around at night. The film has very little info on it, and it's unclear how much of the film was finished, but in my opinion, I think that the two teasers released would probably have been better than the film itself. Child's Play was supposedly going to have a different voice for Chucky, this voice being actress Jessica Walters. This was first found out when during a commentary of the first movie, it was brought up how original voice lines for the doll was going to be a girl. But the creators behind the film felt as if it didn't fit and scrapped the idea pretty early on. It said that a few lines were recorded, but they are yet to be found, with most people thinking they no longer exist or they are stashed away in the MGM vaults. The Scream 2 Goyer MPAA cut refers to one of the 8 different versions sent to the MPAA before the film was passed. This different version was said to be a lot gorier and have slight changes to make the film even more disturbing. In the released version, Ghostface says, "Do you want to die today, Randy?" But in the Goyer cut, he was going to say, "Have you ever felt a knife reach through human flesh to bone?" This was just one of the many changes that were altered to get the film past any problems with ratings. More than likely, any of the 8 different versions of the film aren't around anymore. But if they are, hopefully at some point they could get re-released, or at the very least what the other versions consisted of could be expanded on. So I tried looking and I actually couldn't find anything about these extended death scenes for the 1958 version of The Blob. I can't find any mention of these death scenes and I haven't seen anyone really talk about anything of the sorts. The only place I can think of is on the Blu-ray copy of the film, where 2 commentaries are given by the director and the producer of the film. But still, I couldn't find much of anything. But I'll go out on a limb here and say something probably pretty controversial. I believe that these deleted scenes probably only consisted of slightly longer death sequences. I know it sounds crazy, but that's the best guess I got. The Exorcist 3 supposedly had a scene in which a priest is decapitated, and is seen on a bench holding his own head. Of course, this scene was removed due to how graphic it was, but a few rumors claim that in different prints, this scene can be found. However, this was not the case, and the scene was removed before any release, and all that is available is a few pictures of the scene. An American Werewolf in London was supposed to be a remake of the 1981 film by the same name. It was stated by Max Landis that he finished a script for the movie, but the movie never began any sort of production. However, he was going to release the script, but was stopped after Universal threatened legal action. The remake was said to have plenty of differences, one of which being the first werewolf rampage, being presented in the found footage style, something that I could totally see working out extremely well. However, possibly a big reason as to why the script wasn't picked up was due to the backlash Max Landis had received, due to him committing psychological and sexual abuse on women, leading pretty much to his cancelization and stalling of his career. Near Dark was going to be a remake of the 1987 film of the same name. However, this remake was cancelled due to the film Twilight coming out around this time, in which Near Dark shared many similarities. There isn't much info on how much of the remake was worked on before it was cancelled, but in my opinion, a remake wouldn't make too much sense, considering the original film failed to break even on its budget. However, the film does have a pretty decent following and is pretty well liked by critics, so I guess a remake wouldn't be too stupid to do. But seeing the success of Twilight makes me believe that if Near Dark was to be released, it probably would have only been in the shadow of Twilight. Bride of Frankenstein was said to have 12 minutes ultimately taken out of the director's cut due to these scenes being considered as nothing but filler. The most notable scene taken out was the prologue, with other scenes being taken out lowering the overall kill count from 21 to 10. The prologue being cut can cause some confusion when it comes to some dialogue in the movie, and the missing 12 minutes of film is said to no longer exist, being canned in the 40s. However, this could possibly just be a myth, and the rest of the film could exist somewhere out there, with the only surviving media of these deleted scenes being a few pictures. This entry, known in English roughly as The Death Deck, was the first feature-length film to be made in Chile. However, the film was banned due to the movie being based off a real crime. And at the time, the crime was not yet solved by a court ruling. There is very little info about this film and what exactly it contained, with the only thing being well known is its legal trouble and what the film was based on. Hellraiser Warehouse 1 and 2 were fan-made short films that depict two main characters coming across Pinhead. The films have little to no info on them, besides a basic synopsis and a few screenshots of the shorts. It was said that the first film was able to be seen on Baron von Porkchop's Terrifying Tales of the Macabre Halloween special. However, I could not find any information on this special. The Weird Ones was a sci-fi horror film that was about this alien creature coming from space and killing women, with the film having a lot of strange sexual undertones, with characters using a female alien to pleasure themselves and to lure in other aliens. The film was extremely low budget, and it's said that any copies of the film were destroyed in a garage fire, and the only thing surviving were a few promotional pieces such as the film's poster. Known in English as The Hallucinated Alchemist, this 1897 short trick film has very little information on it, with the only real description of the film being an anthropomorphous star with 5 female heads and a giant face has people coming out of its mouth. I have absolutely no clue what that means, but my goodness does this sound pretty good. There are supposed clips of this short online, however these clips are from a different silent film that goes by the name of The Mysterious Retort, and was a 1906 silent film. This confusion may be due to the fact that The Mysterious Retort is also known as The Alchemist and the Demon, a very similar name to The Hallucinated Alchemist. Obey is a lost film revolving around a sailor who finds himself stuck on an island, who at some point gets put under a voodoo spell known as Obey. Any existing copies of this film are said to no longer exist, and what little info people have on this film don't seem to add up, with some information claiming this movie was filmed in 11 months, over a huge 20-stop cruise, with other pieces of information claiming it only lasted 4 months. This entry refers to a 2008 film known in English as Beyond, or also known as On the Other Side. The film is about a mirror that leaves a family dealing with dark forces. This is a Russian film that was lost for some time until inevitably being found, with a simple Google search leading to the entire movie. The Shadow of the Desert is a silent horror film based on the book The Shadow of the East. The film is about a man who, although married, meets his former lover on a trip to India. However, his wife soon finds out and out of jealousy kills herself, leading to the main character to remarry. Due to all this jealousy, anger, and guilt, a spell is cast upon the man to cause him to feel a huge amount of remorse for his wife's passing, with the last bit of the film being about finding a bandit thief. The only thing known to be surviving of this film is mainly promotional material, most notably the movie's poster. Metal Noir was a shock film first made in the late 1980s, but was released in the 90s with little to no attention. The movie centers around a man who finds himself buying a house that just so happens to be possessed by a husband and wife. And if that wasn't bad enough, the wife also happens to be satanic. The film was long lost for a good while until it was finally released on DVD. The movie has very mixed opinions, with some thinking it's great, others thinking it's okay, and most thinking it's trash. Sleepaway Camp is similar to other slasher films from the time, like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. The movie, much like Prom Night, had a few songs made specifically for the film. These songs being Just What I've Been Looking For, Take a Chance, and Tonight You're Mine. These songs in their entirety were deemed lost for a while. Yes, they were played in the movie, but the music was mostly obstructed by fight scenes and other dialogue, leaving the full songs incomplete. It wasn't until 2015 in which the full mastered soundtrack for the film was released. In The Mind of the Damned is a low-budget horror film that explores a man's mental health as he deals with a bad acid trip. The film was released but was quickly pulled down, due to the cast's dislike of the movie's plot, with the biggest disagreement being about the drug use and themes of murder. It wasn't until 2018 that the director of the film sent the full movie to an anonymous source, in which this anonymous source posted the full movie online. Known in English as The System of Dr. Gordron and Professor Plume, this entry is about a French silent film from 1913. The film is also known as Dr. Gordron's System, and is an adaptation of the story The System of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather by Edgar Allan Poe, and revolves around a man being brought to an insane asylum in which it turns out the asylum is run by the inmates. And the main character is told if he wants to cure his insanity, he needs to cut out his eye. It's interesting to see stories like this, where films are lost but are based on other media, to where we can have an idea of how the movies play out, but of course at the end of the day, our imagination can only do so much. The Keep is a 1983 supernatural horror movie based on a book of the same name. The story is about soldiers who camp out in a citadel during World War II, and two of the soldiers end up stealing a silver cross off the wall, unleashing something from the citadel. The film was originally supposed to be 210 minutes long, but after being shown to Paramount, the film was cut down to 2 hours, and inevitably after horrible reactions after test screening, the film was lowered to only 95 minutes. These cut-out scenes would have supposedly helped with a lot more character development and depth. Scenes would have also been longer, with the ending and many kill sequences being expanded upon. There was hope that the 210-minute version would be released when talks of donations to get the original film scanned and turned into HD were asked for. Sadly, later on it was confirmed it was the 95-minute version, and as of right now, the whereabouts of the remaining minutes of the movie are unknown. The Mysteries of Myra is a lost film from 1916, in which most of the film is lost besides a few clips that are in the Library of Congress film archives. The film is about a young girl named Myra, and her family just so happens to be possessed by the devil, and Myra is marked for death before her 18th birthday. 15 episodes of the series were filmed, however only 3 film reels are found, all coming from the 12th episode. What is extremely interesting to me, however, is that this series of film is widely considered the first piece of film to treat the idea of devils, demons, and spiritual occurrences as a scientific possibility. Known in English as Figures of the Night, this entry is a silent horror film about a crippled man who is the richest man on Earth, but has no friends or acquaintances, only living with his son who isn't the brightest and lives like an animal. The film is an adaptation of the novel Ella Gabel. The film has little information about it, with little to nothing of the film surviving. The Burning is a horror movie from 1981 that is similar to Friday the 13th, so much in fact that many claim it's a ripoff. The film was banned due to its extreme gore, and the uncut version was lost until an Australian VHS copy was found. Many of the songs for the film are deemed lost due to certain songs not appearing in the movie's soundtrack. Most of the songs are found, but with slight changes or quality problems, which leave the original versions of the music lost. This entry, known in English as The Ancestress, is a 1919 horror film about a dead woman returning to haunt the last two people in her family, due to her not being able to rest peacefully until everyone in her lineage is dead. I came across what seems like a big chunk of the film, being 50 minutes long. However, the original runtime was supposedly an hour and 24 minutes long. The 50 minutes are on the Internet Archive website, so I believe the Iceberg should have labeled this film as partially found rather than fully lost. Known in English as The Ghost of the Hunchback and House of Terrors, this 1965 Japanese horror film revolves around a woman who finds out about the passing of her mentally ill husband. The original audio of this film was in Japanese, however, an Italian company picked up the film and re-released the film with an Italian dub. This Italian dub, although rare, was never lost. However, the original Japanese audio was gone for a long time until somewhat recently in 2023, the original audio was found. Amulet is a 1991 horror film based on a novel known as Lone Wolf. The film is about two brothers who move from their village in search of a better life. However, one of the brothers turned into a real vampire. Part of the reasons the film was lost was due to it not being screened in normal theaters, and was in fact only shown at a few festivals. It wasn't until 2023 the film was fully found, and the whole film can be watched here on YouTube. Known in English as The Wanderer of the Grey Vampire Woman, A Tale of the Heavens Without End or Beginning, this film is a silent horror film about two sisters in which one of them is a vampire. The film didn't get too many good reviews, with a lot of criticism being thrown at the plot. Not much information is available on this film, besides the people behind the work, most notably the director, the cast, and crew. The Peacemaker was said to be a 1986 horror movie made by Orion Pictures. This film was inevitably cancelled due to rough financial years for the company, causing them to have to cut back on costs, leading to the film being abandoned. The only thing we have of the film is a promotional trailer that is said to only have been made to sell the rights of the movie. Cruel Ghost Legend was a lost Japanese horror film that had little information on it until its discovery on a VHS rip in 2014. The only thing really known about the film before its recovery was the synopsis of the film, with it being about a blood curse that leads to numerous bloody deaths, incest, a ghostly manifestation, and ultimately suicide. Which, I don't know about you guys, but that sounds like my typical weekend. You know, just without the incest part. A VHS of the tape was found on Amazon, however it was roughly $120, and the film wasn't widely available till someone who owned the tape released it online. Body of a Female is a horror movie about a stripper who gets kidnapped and tortured by a wealthy man, in which she does end up escaping, but her abuser tries to track her down and kill her before she can notify authorities. Not much of the film is known, with only the synopsis, runtime, and crew being somewhat easy to find. Much like many of these lost films, the only real look we have at the film is promotional material. Revenge of Bigfoot is a partially lost PG-rated horror film about Bigfoot. The film is actually mostly found, with an hour-long video of it being posted on YouTube by someone who played a role in the movie. However, their copy is not complete, with the ending of the film freezing and the last part of the movie being lost. Besides the post on YouTube, there aren't many known copies of the film, with the uploader of the video claiming they believe to have the only existing copy. Friday the 13th, Part 7 had many problems when it came to meeting a certain rating, with many scenes being cut out to reach the desired rating. Many of the scenes that got cut were intense over-the-top deaths, with one of the found deleted scenes showing Jason squashing a character's head like a pancake. A good chunk of these deleted scenes are actually found due to the director releasing 15 minutes of cut content. However, he claimed that the original scenes were destroyed, and what is widely shown is what is left of these destroyed scenes. Deranged is a horror film that centers around a man who goes insane after his mother dies, which leads to him not only becoming a murderer, but also a grave robber, with his main goal being to collect other bodies to keep his dead mother company. The film had some cuts to it due to the final product being too graphic, and it wasn't until a 2013 Blu-ray release came out in which all cut content was put back into the film. The reception of the movie was pretty middle of the road, with some loving it and others not so much. Poltergeist had a few scenes that were altered in a few ways. These altered scenes were filmed but never used. One scene was originally supposed to show one of the main characters pinned against their bedroom wall, with black-like tentacles surrounding her. This scene was inevitably changed to something a bit more simple, with the same character being pinned against the ceiling and the strange black tentacles aren't used. It was noted that half of the ghost scenes filmed were cut from the movie, which some of these deleted scenes can actually be found in the original theatrical trailer. Besides the few clips in the trailer and a few pictures, there was also a bunch of the script that was found that features many of these deleted scenes, but it's not fully known which scenes were filmed but scrapped and which ones just never were made. Sweet Home is a 1989 Japanese horror film directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. This film actually was released alongside a video game of the same name, and was apparently a huge inspiration to Capcom's Resident Evil series. The film is found, however the original version of the movie is not. The producer of the film felt that it was necessary to edit and reshoot parts of the film for the home and TV release, and after winning a lawsuit he was allowed to do so, meaning the final product is not the original movie the director had filmed. The plot consists of a small film team exploring the mansion of a famous artist, with the goal of fixing and selling the paintings they find, alongside filming a documentary. Things start getting strange as the team realize the mansion is possessed by the wife of the famous painter, causing most of the team to die, with the end of the movie only seeing 3 members of the team survive. This movie is definitely a big deal, considering the film and video game are linked to pretty much creating Resident Evil. And sadly, more than likely, the original director's version of the film no longer exists. But I'm very intrigued to know just exactly what was changed.